How about now? Can you hear me?
There you go. Yep.
Okay,
Yep, I heard that for sure.
because it's muted on graphics.
Yes, ma'am. That's it. So it's muted. That's the stream and the Zoom. They're both the same.
Okay, so as soon as I switch over to whichever camera, then it'll work.
You got it. Yeah, I'm hearing you
Okay,
clear. See everything on the Zoom meeting looks great.
perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Stay close to your phone.
All right, it is 6:33, Tuesday, June 14th. I'm going to call the Historic Board to order here first before the Planning Board. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right. If we can get a roll call of the members.
Donald Alderman,
Here.
Brad Riddle,
Here.
John Walsh,
Here.
Tim Bolliger, and Hector Tavares.
Here.
Okay, since we're doing the Historic Board, we have the previous minutes from the last meeting. If everyone's had a chance to go over that, I need a first and a second.
I make a motion. I make a motion that we accept last month's meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Okay, it carries 4-0. All righty. Now, the first item up on the Historic Board is Z22-000028. Are there anybody in the audience that wants to speak on this? No, okay. Could I have you read the resolution when you get a chance?
I certainly can.
Okay.
So there's no resolution for that one, it's just actually an application.
Oh, an application.
I would be happy to give
Okay.
you a little rundown of that.
Go right ahead. It's your floor.
Let me share my screen real quick. Everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Alright, so this is Z22-000028. It is putting a fence, a wooden fence, 6 foot tall in the back, 4 foot on the front, painting the house. This is within the historic district. So the colors, very normal, gray color is what this example would be. Shutters were gonna be black, red door. The applicant provided pictures of the fence, so this is the fence that's gonna be going in the front, so you can still see, and the privacy fence obviously in the back area. They are not altering the structure in any way, besides the paint, so no architectural changes, not going to affect the significance for the area. I took a look at what was in the area as well. There are similar wood fences, there is similar paint color, there is definitely a very large range of colors in this area. Grays, lights, yellows, beige, blues, and definitely different accent colors. So I had seen quite a few different things in that area. So staff is recommending approval for this because it is not taking away from any sort of historic significance in the area. The vision triangle wouldn't affect any sort of traffic issues there.
Okay, then. That's the only question I have. Anything else?
It's a corner unit.
Yeah, it's a corner unit right there. All right. Any public discussion? Anyone? Still no one out there? Anybody online? Oh, we're not?
We've got no one online except for
Okay.
people.
All right, then I'll need a first and a second to approve or not to, no motion at all to not approve it.
I'll make a motion to accept 028.
I second.
All right, we have a first and second. Could we get a roll call vote on the approval? Oh, I'm sorry, wait. I'm sorry, you can't do a roll call yet. We have to open it again one more time. Anybody got something else to say? All right, now we can go ahead and, you can do the roll call.
Gotcha. Donald Alderman,
Yes.
Brad Riddle,
Yes.
John Walsh,
Yes.
Tim Bolliger is absent, and Hector Tavares.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, I need a motion to close the meeting.
I make a motion to close the historic board meeting this evening.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, same? All right, the meeting is closed at 6:38. Okay. So that one's done. All righty. I now am opening the planning board meeting, At the same time, at 6:38, we've already done the Pledge of Allegiance. We already have the roll call down. So the first thing on the agenda is approval of the previous meeting's minutes. I need a first and a second for, if you guys have already gone over them.
We approve the minutes.
And I second it.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign? All right, that passes 4-0. All right, the first thing on the agenda here is, let me see, where's it at? Resolution number PZ/LPA space LDC space 22, what? Oh, I'm sorry, 22-04. If I get the attorney to read that resolution, please.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to do so. Chair Alderman, tonight, we have several items on the agenda.
Right.
And some of these items are legislative in nature, some of these items are quasi-judicial in nature. So items 1 and 2 are related to legislative matters. Changing the comp plan, changing the future land use map is legislative. When you get down to the zoning part or a site plan approval, that is quasi-judicial. So when we get to item number 3, I'm going to ask for all persons that intend to speak as to items 3 and 4 to stand up and be sworn. If Jenny wants to swear them, I'll be glad to let her do it. If she wants me to do it, I'll do it. And then I'm going to go through the procedure that is followed in quasi-judicial matters. We have a resolution that we passed in 2018, it's 2018H, that specified the procedure that we follow in quasi-judicial matters. So we'll go through that with specificity at that time, and I'll guide you through that process. So that's how we'll do it. And when we get to number 3, I'll jump in and we'll do that. But for right now, I'll read resolution number PZ/LPA LDC 22-04, a resolution of the Plan Board of the City of High Springs, Florida, serving also as the local planning agency for the City of High Springs, Florida, recommending to the City Commission of the City of High Springs, Florida, approval of an amendment to the text of the City of High Springs Land Development Code as amended pursuant to an application LDC 22-04 by the City Commission, providing for amending Table 2.01.01 entitled Future Land Use Zoning District Compatibility by adding an AG, Agricultural District, Zoning District, and deleting the references to RM Mixed Residential, TND Traditional Neighborhood Development, and TCDBN Traditional Town Center Zoning Districts, providing for amending Section 2.0104.01 entitled Conservation District by renaming the title to read Conservation and Agricultural Districts, and by adding an agricultural zoning district, repealing all resolutions in conflict and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion at the appropriate time will be to pass resolution number PZ/LPA LDC 22-04 upon its reading by title only. And with that, Mr. Chair, I believe our planning staff, Christie, would tell you what this is all about, and I can jump in and assist as need be.
Hi, I'm gonna represent this one tonight. I'll update you on what it is. Good evening, Plan Board and City Attorney and Chair.
Hey, Ashley, I didn't see you there, so I apologize, jumping over you.
Oh, that's okay. There were hearing difficulties, so I had to get out of the meeting and get back on. This is the second part of creating the Ag District. At the last meeting, y'all went through the table and approved ag being put in the allowable uses table. At this meeting, we're asking you to
Any questions on the board or statements?
I missed out on the first part of this thing.
Well, this is the, yeah, just the second step of the first thing.
No, I have no questions.
Okay, since this is procedural, I guess it's just in-house. I need a first and a second.
I recommend we approve this 2204.
I second.
Okay, we'll need a roll call vote on that. Oh, I'm sorry.
For participation.
Oh,
from
on
the
this
public
even?
first,
Okay, my
yes.
mistake then.
Yes,
I
sir.
thought it was because it was procedural. Is there anyone in the public like to speak on the rezoning or adding the agricultural to the zoning? Anybody online? Oh, we're not, oh, there is not. Okay, my mistake. Okay, well, then that's closed. Anybody on the board, any more discussion? Okay, then I guess now I need the first and second.
You're okay with your first and second, the motion's on the floor, now you can call the vote. since
Okay, now I
there's
call,
no-
okay.
no-
We're okay with the first and second, then I need a roll call vote on this resolution?
Donald Alderman,
Yes.
Brad Riddle,
Yes.
John Walsh,
Yes.
Tim Oliver is absent, Henry Tapanas.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, the second item that we have is a resolution, again, of this board to create on a plan map, and I'll go ahead and read this by resolution, by its title only. Is a resolution number PB/LPA CPA 22-01, a resolution of the Plan Board of the City of High Springs, serving also as the local planning agency of the City of High Springs, Florida, recommending to the City Commission of the City of High Springs, Florida, approval of an amendment of more than 50 acres of land to the future land use plan map of the City of High Springs Comprehensive Plan pursuant to an application CPA 22-01 by the property owners of said acreage under the amendment procedures established in sections 163.3161 through 163.3248 of the Florida statutes as amended, provided for a change in the land use classification from county rural agricultural less than or equal to 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres to city agriculture less than or equal to 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres of certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of High Springs, Florida, repealing all resolutions in conflict and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair, is for passage. You can pass, you can continue this to a date certain, or you can deny it, which is resolution number PB/LPA CPA 22-01.
Christie, you want to drop in anything on this? Or I'm sorry, not Christie. Ashley, you got anything on this?
Yes, I do. I just want to kind of explain a little further. So this is actually there's several parcels, in this, amendment to the future land use map. Includes, when you add them all together, it's 735 plus or minus acres. The location is south of US 27, south of Northwest 174th Avenue and east of Northeast 80th Avenue. It's based in the southwest fringe of the city. Their High Springs Estates, has 2 parcels that touch it on the east. So there's that, but the, existing is, as, the city attorney says, county rural agricultural. So city agricultural would be appropriate to place ag on top of ag. And again, you wouldn't want it to be anything else, because if you did, it would open up other zoning districts to, solar power. You want to be not, you don't want to do that.
So, Mr. Chair, when we annex in property, the property that this particular property, my understanding is, and I think there's representatives for the property owner that are here, my understanding is the property is currently zoned agricultural on the future land use plan map of the county. And so when they annex in, now, we have to apply the county regulations unless we take authority, zoning authority over that property. So it's very common to, when you annex property, to take the same zoning classification designation, which is on the future land use map as ag. It's very common to go from ag to ag. That's essentially what is happening. Now we get to apply our rules to the property and not apply county rules to the property. That's, we have more control over the property. That's exactly right. And this is a very common function. I'm very used to annexations, very used to exercising control over the property with respect to that. Whenever you have, when you grow and you add property to your municipal boundaries. Now, I will say there is one proviso to that happened as a result of the election that occurred last year. If you'll remember, there was growth management area by charter created by Alachua County. The cities of Alachua, Newberry, and Archer contested that provision as not proper. It was a violation of home rule power, is what those cities contended in a case against Alachua County. That case was decided on count one, and Judge Brazenton decided that the county did have adequate notice and adequate language on the referendum that was placed before the voters, and it very narrowly passed. I can't remember what the difference of the vote was, but it was real narrow for and against, but there was sufficient number of for votes. And so the referendum enacted that part of Alachua County's charter, which says you can't change zoning without basically county approval on those growth management areas. And so there's a little bit of a twist on what I just said, but it's in those areas that are mapped in the growth management area designations, and this property is not one of those properties.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And you said, is anyone from the public want to speak on this? Are the applicants here for, that's not for this though, right?
We have one here.
Yes, okay. If anyone, you want them all that are going to speak to raise their hand, or?
No, this is not
Not the quasi?
quasi-judicial
Okay.
yet.
So they
We're
can just
not
come up
there
and
yet.
speak?
They
Okay.
can come up and
All right,
speak.
whoever would like to come up and speak, one at a time. Is it green? It is no color at all. All right. All right. That's the wireless one. PowerPoint advance then on the Oh, yes, we can. So if you'll state your name, who you're with, and you can go from there, I guess.
Gladly, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Jerry D. Bach, members of the Planning and Zoning Board, and Walker, City Attorney.
Sorry, we're not getting any sound on Zoom.
Steve, how about now?
Oh, good. Now it works. Thank you.
Okay. Again, my name is Jerry Diedenbach. I am a certified planner. I am vice president of Cassaw, Hewitt, and Walpole, or CHW Professional Consultants. And I am here this evening on behalf of Duke Energy, representing these two applications that you see before you, number 2 and 3, and then also number 4, the site plan. Also with me tonight is Ms. Vanessa Ann Goff here in the front row. She is the Director of Renewable Energy for Duke, and she is here on behalf of the application too. So we are here tonight to, pardon?
Don't forget Beth.
And I'm not going to forget another member of my staff. She may not want to be called out, though. Ms.
Beth used to work at our law firm some
And
years ago.
she is a project coordinator at CHW Professional Consultants, and she works specifically in construction engineering inspection services. But as she was with us last night in the city of Newberry, Beth is very eager to learn more about the public engagement and the public process for approval. So last night, we were at the City Commission in Newberry, and she has volunteered tonight to come to City of High Springs Plan Board. She is a lifetime Alachua County resident and seems to know way more people than I do, which is pretty cool because she went to school with so many folks here. So, Beth, thank you for being here. We are here tonight on behalf of Duke Energy, and I have a presentation for the following 3 items: for the large-scale land use amendment, for the rezoning application, and then for the site plan. And as Mr. Walker stated, the first item is a legislative item, meaning that it is of the intent of the commission what they wish to do with a piece of property. It does not follow the rules of quasi-judicial proceedings. We are here to request a large-scale land use amendment to place agricultural land use on an area that has been annexed into the city of High Springs that previously had Alachua County agricultural land use. The opportunities that are presented by this application are the ability to promote long-term compatibility of uses and the lowest intensity development possible in your comprehensive plan against the city's edge. Because as you annex, you're increasing the edge, if you will, of the city. And it also then retains the long-term viability of the area to have low-density residential and agricultural uses such as farming, silviculture, and other by right uses that occur in the agricultural land use. So the request, as Mr. Walker stated, is to go from rural ag county to High Springs new agricultural land use classification. I have the one beneath that grayed out because that will be another application that's before you. The project site exists on the western edge of the city of High Springs, and you can see the approximate 730 acres there. It's listed in your resolution as about 735, but by actual survey, it comes in at 714.77 acres. The GIS maps sometimes are a little bit off. Property today is largely in an active dairy use, and there is active silviculture on the site. Mr. Pat Post owns some of the properties, and he grows pine trees on the southern portions of this property. The process that we have followed is we went through and met with city staff in pre-application meetings and conducted an annexation to bring this property into the corporate limits or the municipal limits of the city of High Springs. That occurred last year, and following that, in December of this year, December 21, we submitted a large-scale land use amendment and a rezoning application to place High Springs land use and zoning upon the property. In the course of the city's update to its own comprehensive plan, you created the agricultural land use classification. So our original applications were seeking a residential, which is effectively, as Mr. Walker stated, functioning as an agricultural type land use, and Ms. Ashley, the city manager, stated the same. Now you actually do have an agricultural land use classification, so we amended our application materials to request that exact category. And in many ways, what we see here is this is what we would call a like-kind exchange. You're going from county ag at 1 unit per 5 acres to city ag at 1 unit per 5 acres. So this is the existing future land use map, and this depicts the rural ag county, the light mint green color on there. And what we are requesting to do is go from that county rural ag to city ag. And that will be a like-kind exchange. The Regional Planning Council, who functions as professional planning staff and assists with the application processes, have issued a letter to you all that should go to the City Commission with this application, and in that they have looked at the following categories. They have looked at potable water, sanitary sewer, solid waste, drainage impacts, recreation impacts, traffic impacts, affordable housing, surrounding land uses, historic resources, flood-prone areas, wetlands, minerals, soil types, and then lastly, high aquifer recharge. The Regional Planning Council have found that no level of service deficiencies will be created by this application change because you are effectively going from county ag to city ag. And so with that, Your professional staff have prepared a resolution that's before you that states the following. The Plan Board, serving as the local planning agency, has determined that found said application for an amendment, as described below, is compatible with the land use element and objectives and other affected elements of the comprehensive plan. Moreover, in the next clause, the Plan Board, serving as the local planning agency, has determined and found the approval of said application for an amendment, as described below, would promote the public health, safety, morals, order, comfort, convenient appearance, and prosperity or general welfare in the city, because it is a like-kind exchange. Therefore, we are respectfully requesting this evening that you allow this property to have High Springs land use, again, ag to ag, and the applicant is requesting that you recommend the City Commission approve the requested large-scale comprehensive plan amendment, Resolution PB-LPA, CPA 2201, and forward the proposed amendment from the City Commission to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for their required expedited review process. Because a large-scale amendment over 50 acres ultimately goes to Tallahassee, and Tallahassee then distributes it through a clearinghouse mode to all the different departments, transportation, education, and so forth. And that concludes my brief presentation, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have, or Ms. Goff will do the same on anything related to the land use.
Thank you very much. Any questions among the board on that?
I'll ask Jerry a couple of questions.
That'd be
Mr.
great.
Chair.
Go ahead.
And I call him Jerry because I've known him for 35 years. So I'm used to him as a planner, and he's testified many times at the cities I represent. Jerry, discuss the difference, if you would, between. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. I forgot to put the mic on. Jerry, if you would discuss the difference between comprehensive plan, future land use map, sometimes referred to as the flume map, and zoning. What is this interplay? What is this all about?
Okay.
Please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Walker. Most cities in Florida's 67 counties and 410 approximate municipalities have both a comprehensive plan and a land development code. The comprehensive plan is the document that outlines the city's goals, objectives, and policies by which growth will occur over a long period of time. And it also addresses how the immediate implementation of land use occurs by referencing municipally into the zoning code. Comprehensive plans should contain things like broad goals to elevate the economic prosperity of a community, with an objective to raise the quality of life for its citizens and its employees and the businesses it hopes to attract, and then policies. The city shall create multiple zoning categories, so if somebody comes to the city, they can either buy a residential home or open up a business or start an automobile dealership or create a medical office. So the comp plan is this overarching document of goals, objectives, and policies, and with it, it relates to the intensity and density of what can occur on land. Notice I didn't say anything about height, setbacks, number of trips, color of shutters, and things like that. The nuts and bolts of how you build something is all contained in zoning. The comprehensive plan is what you do with land. Ag allows agricultural uses, civiculture, growing trees, dairies, farms, residential at a very low density of 1 unit per 5 acres. And so that future land use map sets out that mixture of land use, or you might call it a mosaic, where your most intensive land uses should be around the core of your city. And as you get toward the peripheral edge, I talk visually because these are mapping issues, when you get to that edge, that tapers down. And if you look at the city of High Springs, and it's right there over Mr. Walker's head, there's your core city with 441, 2741 going down to Newberry, and you see the variety of land uses that exist along your main roadway corridor. Then it tapers into residential, and as you get toward the peripheral edge, you get to lower intensity land uses because you're preserving those areas for rural character things such as agriculture, mining, growing trees, and so forth. So what's before you really is to say it had county land use of agriculture. We want to preserve that same character And Ms. Thanos stated that solar is an allowed use in there, and that is a statewide provision now that in all agricultural land uses and agricultural zonings, solar is a by right use, which is ultimately why we're here. But you are not making that decision in this action. You are merely making a choice. Do we want to take control of this land and have a similar land use classification as Alachua County had on it? Did I answer your question
I think
thoroughly?
you answered the question well. If we decide.
Very well, he explained it to me.
Yes, we understand.
If we decided to do nothing, the current comprehensive plan and future land use map designation is ag, is it not?
That is correct, Mr. Walker, it
And if
is.
we did nothing with respect to this situation, we would be applying county regulations and county rules with respect to this land, which is one of the reasons for us to take zoning authority over this particular property.
That is exactly correct. So some of you may ask the question, why are we even annexing this, or why did we annex this into High Springs and ask for High Springs land use and ask for High Springs zoning? Ms. Goff will give you a great answer to that. It's because many of their customers are residents of High Springs. They wanted to bring the business, the commerce, the increased tax base associated with the facility into the corporate limits of High Springs rather than leaving it in rural Alachua County. The same rules, the state preemption, would allow this use, which we're not talking about right now, but we will in 2 items, it would allow that use if we didn't annex it. But because of Duke's relationship with the community, they wanted High Springs to actually have the benefits of the increase in ad valorem tax. They wanted to employ residents of High Springs during the construction process and offer jobs to residents of High Springs, and that's what they wanted to do from a community perspective. So that's why there's an annexation that passed, and now we're asking you to apply this city's land use to that property.
Thank you. I have no further questions of Jerry.
I don't have any more questions. I do have a statement. Basically, you're saying that this is no more than what recently happened where a property wanted to annex into a city and then become a development, and then the public went out, blocked that, and then they stayed in the county and still built the development.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I see that happen quite a bit. And actually, Mr. Walker stated something, that there used to be an element called the Boundary Adjustment Act. And when that was enacted, Florida Statutes, Chapter 171, 062 stated, municipalities have the authority to impart the former municipality's rules upon a piece of property, which is what we're going to ask you to do later. But in bringing the property in, you are effectively making it a High Springs piece of land. And I think that there's great fiduciary benefits to the city as a whole, as well as the long-term preservation of lands and all.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, sir.
Anybody else want to speak on that particular item? Any discussion or questions from the board? Oh, you'd like to speak? Okay.
Frank Rogers. My wife Jackie and I own some land on the northern boundary of this proposed annexation. And we have neighbors about 400 yards to our left and neighbors about 400 yards to our right. And we all live in close proximity to the northern border of this land. And one question I wanted to ask was, this annexation, does it stop at the north border of this land, or is this going to our land and farther north? What are the boundaries actually going to be of this annexation?
Mr. Chair, if you'd like me to answer, I'm happy to answer. Typically, cities grow by voluntary annexation. Sometimes there's 3 ways a city can grow their land mass. One way is by special act of the legislature. So if the local legislative delegation gets together with your city leaders and they pass a bill in Tallahassee, a special act, they can grow your land mass of the city that way. That's one way it can be done. Second way it can be done, which traditionally has not been very effective, is to have a referendum vote. And the folks in the annexed area have to be very desirous of being annexed, and this happens down in Gainesville a lot. The city limits of Gainesville have not expanded greatly over the years. Now, they're getting some referendum votes here lately where they are able to expand their landmass, but if you look over the last 30, 35, 40 years, the referendum annexations have failed because the people that desire to be annexed do not want to be annexed in the area that is subject to annexation, so it just fails via the referendum. The third way that land can grow is by a property owner saying, hey, I would rather come down here to the city of High Springs and talk to my local zoning board, my planning and zoning board, rather than go to Alachua County in Gainesville where their commission meets. I'd just as soon go here, talk to these folks, or go talk to my city commissioners here. And so I'm going to file a petition for voluntary annexation of my lands. It's usually a very non-controversial event. The city passes the ordinance upon reading twice, and then it becomes effective. But you can't go beyond whatever the voluntary annexation. That landowner is as far as it goes. Now, if you are to the north of that property and your property is contiguous to the boundary of the city of High Springs now, and the property has to meet some other requisites of the statute, it has to be contiguous, compact, has to be, there has to be some urban nature to the city, and the landowner identifies with it. If you said, I want to annex my property to the city of High Springs, that's how we would grow. It can't grow otherwise. One of those three ways, these two ways, your legislative delegation doesn't pick it up. They just don't do it. The referendum annexations genuinely fail. So really the only effective way that cities grow is through voluntary annexations.
I think he's saying that your property, unless you've wanted to come in, is not a part of this.
That's right, that's right.
Now, there is one other.
He said a lot more succinct than I did.
There is also forcible annexation in the case of islands and enclaves, too.
There is. That's a good thing that you point out.
I
So
realize that,
there is a procedure for that as well.
Correct.
got in on this kind of late, so I wasn't sure exactly how far you were trying to go. This is all I have, and I'm assuming the darkened
We
portion
can
is
hear,
what you're taking.
can y'all speak into the microphone?
I'm sorry.
Pull it to your.
I'm not used,
Get his name for the record, I wasn't able to hear that either, I'm sorry.
Frank Rogers,
Thank you.
Russell Frank Rogers. Not used to being a celebrity here. One other question I had. I guess the question would really be for Duke Power. Right now, I'm sorry I don't have any visual aids. Right now, on our property, the north border of this annexed property is about 60 feet from our back door. Right now, there's a dirt road that's been put in right on that border, right on the fence line. For the last year and a half, day and night, there's been dump trucks going up and down that road. You know, it's like being in a barrel hitting it with a hammer. So one thing I was concerned about, I understand that Duke is going to put a buffer zone there. Is that going to include that dirt road and then on into the woods? Enough to make it a true buffer zone? And also, are you going to use points to the east or wherever to make your new entrances into this property?
Yes, you can go ahead if you'd like to answer that for him.
Again, Jerry Diedenbach on behalf of Duke Energy. The answers to your question, I think you will like those because, number one, there will be a generous buffer, but that will be discussed more over in the zoning and the site plan application process as opposed to land use. I will state this for the record, though, now, if I can borrow this. I'm holding the map now in an orientation up, and we all have driven 174th Avenue out here. I've taken video through the sunroof of my car of how narrow that is and how big some of those oak trees are with lots of reflectors on them to say, don't hit me. We have a definitive plan, sir, for the way that this will be constructed, and with the access coming from the west along the paved portion of 174th and coming into the property as quickly as possible in that corner, so that it's not to disrupt that narrow tree canopied street. And the only other access that is proposed, again, this doesn't specifically deal with the land use, but the only other access proposed is, and I'll point it out on the PowerPoint later, on Mr. Post's property, there is an emergency ingress egress here out to the County Line Road, and that will be just in case of secondary emergencies, but no other points poking through or into any other properties are proposed, sir.
Here, and you're saying you're still gonna turn in here and use that?
We're gonna turn in off of the paved section, and there will be a driveway, and we'll actually illustrate that in the site plan later. There'll be a driveway that will come into the property that'll be formalized. Those dump trucks that you've been hearing are the former landowner who has been doing some soil and sand removal. Nothing related to the project at all, and we know greatly about that.
Okay. All right, thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Good evening, Dr. Harold Helms. Hearing me okay? We seem to have had a lot of audio problems tonight.
Yep, I can hear you all right.
Great, thank you. I own the parcel of land adjacent to Z2202, right next door to the Rogers. And yeah, I would say again, here about the construction noise that we have had. Even though it was done by the previous owner, we have had night and day dump trucks up and down there, and it's really been disruptive to us. And all efforts to get that remediated have failed. So again, when Mr., I hope I pronounced your name right, Diedenbach, said that there was going to be a generous setback, I would like to ask Mr. Diedenbach at this time to define generous in standard units of measure.
Okay, wait a minute. Shouldn't this come under the next item? Okay, yeah, this would be all discussed under the
Okay, well,
site plan.
Let me amend my question. Mr. Diedenbach, would you please be sure to do that in the next presentation? Thank you.
I can guarantee you we'll be on top of that too.
Okay, one or two final questions. On the map that we were sent, this map, there is a key that says things outlined in a heavy black line are City of High Springs, correct? You want me to bring it up there and let you see it?
Yes, if you want to, have that particular map.
The only one I have. All right, now.
Go ahead and turn around if you need to. Mark where you are.
Now, here's our question for you. Whoever drew this map, here, city limits go apparently going over here off the map, going there off the map, around here, back up here, and off the map. You propose to annex City of High Springs because it certainly appears that way on the map you set out.
At this point, it's not being proposed to annex. Because if that boundary is correct, there's no property.
What there is there.
I understand there's a line there, but I don't think that's actually.
Well, what there is a shared unpaved road.
Right.
And it can be used to do ingress and egress. There's a shared unpaved road that goes along this way to there and then cuts across that way.
That's a good question. We can find this out, but,
Well, we would just like to hear from you if you propose to annex us into High Springs.
well, I'll be honest with you, I'm a firm believer in annexation and everything. I've even am a firm believer in forced annexation, but the city is not. The city is into voluntary annexation. We had a chance over the last several years to forcibly force a bunch of people in the city, never went that route. We could have increased this by 30%. So I can guarantee you that they're not into forcible annexation at this time. Now, things change.
I know.
So, but at this time, I can guarantee that because I was pushing for them to do it and they didn't budge. So they all volunteer.
I also want to add that just because the boundary line is here and there, and you're right in that corner,
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they're still gonna annex you, because the boundary line can be a crooked line. It doesn't have to be something
I was just
straight.
wondering if maybe you're trying to annex that little piece of street.
Well,
For them to have an access road.
if you were to be trapped, let's say all of a sudden this was all annexed here, then you would be considered an island or an enclave.
Yeah.
Then they could come to you, of course, like I said, the city's not into forcing, they would ask you
Okay.
to come in, usually in that
your
case. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Does that clear that up for you?
Yes, it does. And I
Okay.
have one more question, but I'll go back to the microphone.
Okay, then, thank you.
Just to clarify that, so that question was on some sort of access, I just wanna make sure my minutes reflect that, so it was
There-
access.
There's a property line for the city going out on a supposed access road to County Line Road there.
Gotcha, okay, I know which one, okay, got it, I will reflect that in the notes.
Is that actually, that road, a part of the city?
If it's the one that I'm thinking of.
It will be?
it's like a
Oh, it is
little-
now.
It attaches to, the post property, yes, that one's already been annexed in.
Okay, his question is, since that's in this, his question is basically, since that is in the city, is our purpose to annex them afterwards?
Yeah.
And we only usually tend to take voluntary, so you were right, I mean,
Yeah.
unless they were voluntarily trying to come in, but even then, I'm not sure if they meet the criteria, it's just because they're touching the boundary, doesn't mean that they are compact and all that, so, it really depends on which parcel his is and whether he's voluntarily coming to us, but.
Well,
I mean, you
we're-
could,
It looks like
We're
that
making,
offshoot is-
we're making a photocopy of the map, which I understand is going to be appended to your minutes, and maybe everything will become more clear when you see the map.
and even if we
Yeah.
did try to force you in, or you even voluntarily wanted to come in, like she said, you may not meet the minimum requirements.
Okay.
So, not that you're not wanted.
Frankly, we're very happy where we are.
Right.
We're
I
retired,
think
we're
I-
on fixed income.
Well, I
We
think,
don't want to pay new taxes. We're very happy with our situation the way it is.
but I think the last time I talked to someone about annexation, we were actually cheaper than the county at the time, so,
Well,
which saves money.
we're always happy to look into that. I'm always into saving money. Y'all want to make that offer. I am not a resident of the city of High Springs.
Correct.
I am a friend who was very courteously invited here tonight. And I just haven't heard anybody talk about the cost of providing police and fire protection to all this new land, which is going to be significant. Duke Energy's solar power plant, you may think it's a zero carbon footprint. Actually, it's a significant carbon footprint because it takes 700 acres of green plants out of the environment, and green plants are what recycle CO2. So it does have a distinct carbon footprint. It also contains a lot of lithium-ion batteries. And unfortunately, no one from the police or fire department is here tonight. Those have a propensity for catching fire, and they burn like fire and brimstone.
I
They are
understand. I'm a
incredible.
34-year firefighter. I understand
All right, you
exactly.
understand.
I do understand.
I think you may be, in taking this over, exposing the city to the need to purchase additional firefighting equipment, to train additional firefighters. You may have to expand your police force to provide security. And I think as a friend of the city, I would say, please think about that before you quickly take this on. It might be
Chairman,
to your advantage.
Yes,
I'm sorry, he can go ahead, I thought he was done.
okay.
I'm through.
All right. Yeah, for your advice, though, they are actually picking up a new truck as we speak to add to the fleet. So, yeah, they have taken that into account. Go ahead, Ashley.
I just wanted to add that, if we've been treating, again, I want to reiterate, we've been treating rural residential as ag, that you can make a very strong argument that, because that's the only other one that it could possibly be. And, you will be opening up all of rural residential, possibly to a solar power facility, because there's two options, ag or rural residential. And if you make it rural residential, you gotta make it something. If you make it rural residential, you're opening up all rural residential to solar power facilities, because you have to allow the use somewhere. So I just wanna remind you of that. It's really not a choice. You've got to make it something. And the safest thing to make it is ag, and the thing that makes no sense is ag, and by state statute, it's allowed. And if the attorney wants to correct me if I said anything wrong, please correct me, but I just wanted to let you know that, to keep that in mind when making your decision.
One other thing I was going to add to that argument, I referenced the lithium batteries. You might also realize that you're going to have to provide in our fire department very significant hazmat management. If something goes wrong, it's going to be big. And I hope nothing goes wrong for the whole life of the plant. That'd be great. I'd give you one other final complaint that may seem like a technical complaint, but I am an amateur radio operator. I hold an amateur extra class license. That's the highest class license you can get. And I have been in amateur radio for 60 years. I serve as a relay point for all counties to the west to get into a backbone radio network that runs up and down I-75 called the State Amateur Radio Emergency Service. It is the communication service of last resort for the state of Florida. Through that network, I can talk directly to state emergency managers in Tallahassee. I don't need a cell phone. I don't need commercial power. I don't even need Duke's solar power plant. I have my own emergency power. And I do have one concern. And I want to ask again that you address this in your next presentation. I want to know where you're going to locate your power inverters and how you plan to shield them. Because in past facilities, frankly, excuse me, I frankly don't know if you've built all of them, but we are seeing a major problem with these solar farms around Florida. Somebody puts in a solar farm and the radio noise level goes so high that we can't hear incoming signals anymore. And I want to be sure that's not going to happen with this plant. So if you can't explain it to me now, I wish you would ask someone to contact me and explain it. And I'd be happy to talk to your engineers. I think I can speak their language, frankly, much better than our distinguished attorney's language. I have a BS, MS, and PhD in physics from the University of Alabama. I also have an MD, and I was a member of the faculty of the University of Alabama School of Medicine for 20 years. Now I'm retired down here, and nobody has to call me doctor anymore. Everybody gets to call me Hal. And to end on a happy note, you can still call for medical advice, but you have to call between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. On the flip side, now the advice is free. Thank you very much for hearing me out.
Thank you, Hal.
Hal, why are you wearing orange and blue?
I live here now.
There you go. Fair enough.
Okay, on this particular item that we're talking about here, I think a lot of the people are talking that's going to be the next item up, if I'm correct. And Ashley pointed out is, we have to pass this, otherwise and we control it. Otherwise, we then open up everything else if we don't pass this. So if we want to, if anyone has any more statements they'd like to make, do you want to wait, you want to talk now, or you want to wait to the next one?
I've enumerated all his questions, and I would be happy to answer the good doctor's questions under the next one.
Okay, I think that'd be the easiest way. If anyone else would like to speak, but remember, we're just passing this to limit what they can do with the property by creating this classification here. So does anybody else like to speak on this subject, or would they like to wait to the next one? We can do that. All right, any discussion among the board? We good? You got anything? Okay, then I guess we need a first and a second for this item. Which one are we on,
I'll
2?
propose that we pass resolution PBLPA CPA 2201.
I second.
Okay, any more public discussion or board discussion? Any more? No more? Okay, I need a roll call vote.
Alderman,
Yes.
Brad Riddle,
Yes.
John Walsh,
Yes.
Tim Oliver is absent, and Hector Thomas.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, we got the next item up, and if you would like to lead us through that one, this is the quasi.
Yes, sir. This is we have a little different procedure now. This is a quasi-judicial hearing. And the process will be that the applicant the owner of record makes a presentation for us. The evidence that'll be before you is on a competent and substantial basis. So if you desire to pass the measure, it should be based upon competent and substantial evidence. If you desire to deny it, it should also be based on competent and substantial evidence. For example, the gentleman that just spoke has a PhD in physics, so he can talk about engineering issues different than I can talk as a layperson. He understands the nature of that, so his testimony would be ruled upon by a court of law, and in this instance, you're like a judge. In a moment or two, we're going to talk to you about, have you had any ex parte communication, in just a few moments. But when you have special training and special background and experience, then you can speak to issues that would just be an opinion from me or a layperson. Jerry Dienbach has certification as a land planner. Our manager the city manager has a designation as a certified planner as well. So they carry special designation, and their opinion testimony is given weight by you for or against, however they testify and whatever they say. They're the people that can give you opinion testimony. If I give you an opinion testimony on physics, it doesn't go anywhere because I don't have any background. And so part of the process that I'll ask for Jerry to do, and Ashley, we already know she's a certified planner as well, so she's had a great deal of history of planning. Those are the people that can testify in their field on certain matters, and that's where you put your reliance on opinion. Now, factual testimony, somebody that lives next door to the property is entitled to say factually, this is what I see, this is what I believe in, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the difference in the standard that we apply this evening. So at this stage, why don't we start with ex parte communication, just go right down the board line. Have you had any communication outside of this proceeding tonight with any of your constituents, or have you talked with anybody outside of the hearing this evening?
Nope. No.
Okay, and that part of it is done. Now, the next part is swearing in the witnesses, so anybody that intends to speak, if you'll stand up and raise your right hand. This is for anybody that intends to talk about this matter on the subject matter of either number 3 or 4.
If you
Raise
don't,
your right hand.
stand and raise, and then you want to speak, you'll have to go through the process. So if you think you might speak, please go ahead and stand.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Mr. Chair, everybody has been sworn. So at this stage, I'll go to the section of the resolution that speaks to the hearing procedure. And the first item is the city attorney shall read into the record the ordinance resolution by title number, applicant's name, file number, and the subject matter to be cited. So I'll go ahead and read the title of resolution number PB-LPA Z 22-02. This is a resolution of the Plan Board of the City of High Springs, Florida, serving as the local planning agency of the City of High Springs, Florida, recommending to the City Commission of the City of High Springs, Florida, approval of an amendment of 10 or more contiguous acres of land to the official zoning map of the City of High Springs Land Development Code pursuant to an application Z22-02 by the property owners of said acreage, providing for rezoning from county agricultural to city agricultural of certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of High Springs, Florida, repealing all resolutions in conflict and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion at the appropriate time will be to pass resolution number PB-LPA Z 22-02. You can deny it based upon substantial and competent evidence, or you can move this to another date. You can continue it to a date certain in the future, Mr. Chair. With that, the applicant will present his case or her case, and there's no time limit on the applicant for this presentation.
All right, if the applicant would like to speak, also state your name again for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Jerry Diedenbach, CHW Professional Consultants, Executive Vice President. I am an AICP certified planner, and I have 32 years of professional land planning experience. The first 12 years of my career was at the Regional Planning Council, where I worked in transportation planning, and that melded over into land use planning. I've been a member of the Alachua County Planning Commission, a member of the City of Gainesville's Historic Preservation Board, and chaired that board. And my practice over the last 20 years now has been as a principal planner for CHW and a shareholder principal owner of the company. I have testified in multiple quasi-judicial hearings, as well as in hearings with the Department of Administrative Hearings in Tallahassee, and provided expert testimony over a variety of land use and zoning over the last 3 decades. Today's second application before you, thank you, Jenny. It's the rezoning one. Sorry. They were in alphabetical.
That's right.
Thank you. And in the course of my presentation, there are a few questions that were answered, and I hope I can do this as well as he did Diedenbach. But Dr. Carol Helma? Helms. Helms, like the boat. Okay. At the helm. Okay. Just as an aside, I do say I really love coming to the rural communities and the small communities because, as Mr. Walker stated, the vast reason why we do this is because we can have an interaction with people and talk on good common terms and come to understandings. When a member of the public can approach you and ask specific questions that they're concerned about, it gives us the opportunity. And sometimes in the more hectic field of planning and zoning board meetings and city commission meetings, there's so much noise out there that you can't get right to the answers of questions. And I'm going to incorporate some of those answers into this presentation. They will also be relevant to the site plan approval process that's before you. So the second application before you tonight is quasi-judicial in nature, and this is applying zoning classification or a zoning map amendment to that property that you just applied City of High Springs land use on. This one that we're talking about has a little bit different opportunities on it than the land use, because this promotes both the short-term and long-term compatibility of uses by imparting certain specific performance, like how you build things on the property, and to ensure consistency with the development pattern and the uses at the city's edge. I'm pleased to state, and I'm going to see if this, the laser won't work quite so well. At the project edge and in the northwest corner of the property, north of the project site sign and near the end of the 174th Avenue sign, there's a large stand of trees up there. Our application, and part of what we're doing here, preserves to the maximum extent practicable all of the tree lines around the perimeter of the entire property, and that area in the northwest corner is 55 acres of tree preservation. We are not taking those trees down, we are saving them on the property. The only trees that will be removed, and you can see this is largely pasture type land, are those in the interior area. And so, to Dr. Helm's point, the cost of the green footprint on this, we see significant preservation of trees on this property in the way that we are approaching the implementation of this. Secondly, we want to retain the long-term viability of the area and have as low a density residential land use and agricultural use on here as possible, and the zoning will impart that too. So this, like the previous application, is to replace rural ag county zoning with the city's pending new agricultural zoning. So it's again a like-kind change. Again, for reference, this map shows you where in northwest Alachua County, and specifically at the edge of the city, where this property is located. The property today is largely cleared because it is a dairy. There are some tree lines in some of the internal pasture areas which will be modified and removed in some cases, but there is a great deal of preservation which you will see on the site plan, specifically the 55 acres in the northwest corner and then everything around the perimeter of the entire property. The process that we've followed in this mirrors the land use amendment, and one of the things that the Florida legislature and governor have done is something that I particularly like as a planner. It allows us to show you what the land use is and what the zoning is, so you see how that exactly marries, and there's a transparency there, because the way that the application is coming forward, you get to see all three pieces tonight, okay? So we're here today to request that you rezone this property from Alachua County Ag to now the City of High Springs Ag. And the agricultural zoning classification is the only classification that you can place on this, because if I back up 2 slides, now that you have recommended that the City Commission place ag land use on here, the only way to zone it is agricultural zoning. As showed before, your professional planning staff through the Regional Planning Council have looked at all of the concurrency elements that are required in the comprehensive plan, specifically potable water, sanitary sewer, solid waste, drainage, recreational uses, traffic impact, affordable housing, historic resources, flood-prone areas, wetlands, minerals, soil types, and then high aquifer recharge and historic value. I want to state an answer to what was part of a question from Dr. Helms. We do not think, nor do we believe, that this will increase the need for police and fire out here. If this property were to remain as a agricultural use and turn into residential development, as Ms. Stastano stated, 700 acres, give or take, 20 units on every 100 acres at 1 per 5, you might have 150 homes out there. 150 homes would generate a lot more husbands, wives, family members, significant others, and children that would demand car trips that would also then need police, fire, and ambulance services. I will say this, the project will take under a year to construct, and probably about 6 months or so. After that point, solar facilities become a very passive use. The gates are locked, and they're under private security, and they're under 24/7 camera monitoring too, so there's no need for police on here, and there will be definitive security fencing placed around the property. So relative to leaving the land as is, or if it were to transition into residential development, the need for police and fire and emergency services is far less. A solar facility does not place any school children in a school because nobody lives there. You will have roughly about 2 to 3 trips per month that are generated at a facility like this when someone comes by to check on a panel or maybe come by and do the mowing and maintenance of it. A single-family house, by comparison, generates, by the Institute of Traffic Engineers, 9.57 trips per household. This facility, and that's on a daily basis, 9.57 trips, this facility will probably generate, 3-4 trips a month when somebody comes there in a pickup truck or a maintenance-type vehicle to look at the site. Moreover, the project is not proposing on-site energy storage, so there will be no lithium-ion batteries on the site. So this is not a storage-type facility, and so the risk of fire and lithium-ion, again, is negated there. That was a question that was brought forward.
No storage batteries on site?
No battery storage on site, sir. Doctor. Yep, there's no storage on site. Okay, so in the professional report prepared by the Regional Planning Council and is referenced in your resolution tonight, there are items A through N that are dealing specifically with the quasi-judicial standards of competent and substantial evidence. And I apologize for reading these, but as part of the record, I think it is due to you as a respective term to you. Number 1, or A, the proposed change will not be contrary to the land use plan and would not have an adverse effect on the comprehensive plan. It is ag zoning being requested to be placed on ag land use. B, the proposed change is compatible with the existing land use pattern in the area. And as you saw from the maps, all of the proximate land uses and zonings in the area in this western portion of the city are rural ag, and they are ag use. So in planning terms, what we call is a logical nexus. You have the same type of land use against and abutting the property as well as adjacent. Item C, the proposed change will not create an isolated district unrelated to the adjacent or nearby districts. That deals with spot zoning. This is not placing a dot of something in an unrelated, irrelevant area. Item D, the proposed change will not result in a answer to that is this property has been legally annexed into the city. No other properties are being proposed for annexation, and this logically places zoning of agriculture on agricultural land use. Item G, enter into the property to bring initially the construction traffic and then future project maintenance will come off of that paved portion of the road. We will not intend nor will we direct anybody to use the graded portion, that's the tree canopied section that's on the north of the property and goes easterly. And so by the fact too that we are not proposing any intensity, so there's no living conditions or living quarters. There's no business operated here other than the passive collection of solar rays into photons that turn into energy. Nobody will be on the site, so it is not increasing traffic at all, really. It'll be far less than a single-family residential home. Item I, the proposed change will not create drainage problems. The good Lord's rain that lands on this property today will hit those panels in the future and trick very well-drained soils. And so I do not see any change in the drainage patterns occurring across the 700 plus acres. Number J, the proposed change will not seriously reduce light and air to adjacent uses. So since we are not building anything higher than at its tallest point, and I'm a tall guy that'll probably be doing this, I like to make the analogy that panels do this. In the morning, they're facing the eastern portion. They will click through the day, and at the end of the night, they will rotate back and rest. And they are tracking panels. They don't make an excessive amount of noise. They're more or less on like a screw drive type system, and it turns in small micro step increments, kind of like a 3D printer. So the panel may move just a degree, and then another degree, and at the end of the night, it'll go back. So there's very little noise emitted from this. And again, since nothing is very tall, it's not going to affect any light or shadows on adjacent property, nor will it affect the airflow. That's really designed at, if you're going to be building taller buildings and changing air patterns. But again, those panels probably at the tallest point, again, I'm a tall guy, about 9 to 10 feet when they're fully erect, and then when they're at a tilted position, they probably are more. My shoulder. Her shoulder. And I'm short. 4'9". She told me today she's 5'7". Yeah. Item K, the proposed change will not adversely affect property values in the adjacent area. And this is a concern that folks have all the time when anybody is talking about land use or zoning changes. What will this do to the most primary piece of my inheritance or real estate that I think of, my house? Studies have shown consistently that the inclusion of solar collection facilities, because they are a very passive use, does not have a negative or deleterious effect on surrounding property values. They are a very passive use, and when they are there, they are quiet, generating no trips, no light, no odors. They're not putting pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers on the ground, that they make a very compatible use. Moreover, they are seen throughout the state of Florida in areas right by the Tallahassee airport or in Palm Beach where they're adjacent to residential neighborhoods. We don't see them because you tend not to notice them once they're built. And so consistently throughout the studies that have been performed, there is not a deleterious or a negative effect on property values in the area. And that is largely due to the fact that they're so quiet, they're so passive, and there are large buffers proposed, and there will be on this project too. Specifically, Alachua County had voted over the course of the last year on the buffering requirement for zoning. And what you're going to hear in the next item is that we have specifically complied with Alachua County's buffering standards, which say solar facilities shall be no closer than 75 feet from non-residential uses or 150 feet from a residential type use. So around the entirety of the complete proposed project, we have a 150-foot buffer consistent with the county's rules. The county also states in that rule that you will have a high-density vegetative and screening type buffer of 40 feet when adjacent to residential. We are proposing a 100 feet, which is 2.5 times the required width of the Alachua County buffer. So within the 150-foot wide setback from the property edge, we are going to have 100 feet of that vegetated as opposed to the county's requirement, which is only 40. Wow. Item L. The proposed change will not be a deterrent to the improvement or development of adjacent property in accordance with the existing codes. And that should be fairly self-explanatory because we are not proposing to change any surrounding land use or zoning on the property, and people will enjoy the quiet enjoyment of their property and be able to do what they are doing today in residential or ag type uses around the property with no effect of this plan. Item M, the proposed change will not constitute a grant of a special privilege to an individual owner as contrasted with the public welfare. And as your city manager stated, and I did at the last item, Florida statutes have permitted agricultural land use and agricultural zoning areas to allow solar by right. So there is no special privilege being applied to this. If this land stayed in Alachua County, we'd be down at the corner of University and Maine asking for the same thing. There's no special privilege being here. And finally, the last one, the proposed change is not out of scale with the needs of the neighborhood or city. This is one that's a little tough to talk about here because we're not really talking about scale. If we were comparing 50 units in a subdivision to somebody building 800 units, that'd be a factor of 16-fold. But what we're proposing here is effectively placing a passive collective panel or a series of panels with DC to AC converters in a field, putting a fence around it and locking it and going away. So it's difficult to make a comparison of scale because there isn't another solar facility next to it. What you are effectively doing, though, is you are effectively removing an active dairy and commercial or industrial tree growing for the purpose of feeding that into the building material stream of hopefully the United States of America and not shipping it across the seas. So this is not out of scale because across the countryside you will see large uses like this, and there are uses in Alachua County next to east of Noonan's Lake, south of Melrose or Santa Fe, where there are solar facilities out in the countryside like this. And so it is appropriately scaled for a rural type facility. That was a mouthful. But that is what is called competent substantial evidence. The Regional Planning Council came up with those items, as did your staff. As a professional planner, I have been working over the past 32 years in comparing land use and many zoning applications. And I would like to tell you under oath that based on the competent substantial evidence that you are hearing tonight and the application materials that are all duly filed with the City of High Springs, the Regional Planning Council's concurrency report, the city's resolution that's before you, the presentation, and the professional work of the engineers that have designed and worked on this facility, that this is compliant with your comprehensive plan and land development code, and therefore we are respectfully requesting that the City of High Springs Plan Board recommend the City Commission approve the rezoning of Resolution PB-LPA 2202 and place agricultural zoning on top of the pending agricultural land use. And there are a couple more questions that Dr. Helms had, but I will answer those specifically with the site plan so we can show an actual physical map, because I want everyone to see exactly what's happening and where it's happening on the ground. But again, I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you'd like to talk to Ms. Goff, who is a professional engineer, about any specifics, she is here to help and answer your questions.
Okay, one question right off the top, just for my own. There's a solar panel set up going out toward Fort White on the left-hand side. Is that yours also? Okay, just a question. Okay, name?
Sorry, Vanessa Goff, Duke Energy. There's one in Fort White. Yep, there's right up the road too. There's another one, Santa Fe and Columbia.
Okay, all right. You answered my question about the buffer and stuff. I just have a couple questions. I guess I don't know if, yeah, let me go ahead and ask them now. How often do these panels have to be cleaned?
So I'll give a little bit of my experience so that you have something to back up what I'm
Right.
saying with. I am a chemical engineer by degree. I have a master's in business. I've been with Duke Energy for 20 years. I started working as a power plant engineer, working on coal boilers. Then I moved to develop like biomass, 50 megawatt biomass projects. And starting in, when was my daughter born? 2009, I started working on solar. And I started working on very small scale solar from like 1 megawatt solar as a development engineer on the project. So I'd be the one who would do the preliminary engineering works, but I'm not a PE. I don't have a PE certification, but I would do the preliminary engineering work on it. And then I moved into development and then director of development. So I've been working on solar for, oh my goodness, 11 years. So
Okay.
How often do the panels need to be cleaned?
how often do the panels need to be cleaned? So if you get more than like 2.5 inches of rain, you do not need to wash panels. So how Jerry was talking about how the panels will go and they'll rotate and rotate and rotate. At night, we'll store them. And because here, the humidity and the morning dew will collect on the panels, and then first thing when they start off, you tilt them, and the water falls off and washes them. So there's enough rain in Florida. If somebody in Florida was to decide to clean their panels, it rains so much. Like, how are you supposed to, you could get it off with rain. Why would you spend all this money trying to clean something, and then all of a sudden the weather does it for you? And planning that, the only place they really do that is out in the desert.
Okay, I mean, you know, bird poop on it and everything,
It
just wash it?
It doesn't impact it.
Okay.
It's not impactful enough.
Don't you use a hydrophilic glass on the panels too? So the rain sheets on?
Yeah, it sheets off, yeah.
Okay, so you're not gonna need to put in a big well system and all that and everything?
No, there is an O&M building
Right.
that has one bathroom in it. So typically what we do is we have a very, very small septic that we'd have to get a permit from the Department of Health and a small 4-inch well. And all that would feed would be that bathroom.
Okay,
So as opposed to the large consumption wells used in agriculture, this site will have one 4-inch well.
okay. What's the proposed life of these solar panels?
30 years.
30 years?
Yep. All of our solar facilities are based on a 30-year asset life.
Okay.
However, leases allow us to do up to 15 more if the landowners are willing to let us lease and it makes sense.
Because I did some research on this based on that, and I've been finding, and of course, it's just one of the negatives that they were popping up is that a lot of these solar farms lose their efficiency at a certain time, and they're averaging between 12 and 15 years before they actually just quit using them. Is that something new with the new panels, or is that just because they were older panels and the technology's increased that far?
So some folks may decide, I mean, there was a point where modules were very, very inexpensive. So if you had these panels, like since 2009 till now, panels have gone from 295 watts per panel to about 550. So, I mean, the efficiency has doubled, right? So some folks may decide to do that if modules are cheaper, but that's the way our business model is set up is these panels have a guaranteed efficiency of 80% for up to 25 years. And so we base our value in all of our flow model calculations on that efficiency. And then it's like basically 0.5% of degradation every single year.
Okay, yeah, I was reading this between 5 and 8, 0.8% per year on average. All right, I guess the last question I have on this well, actually, next to last, let's say you don't get, after 30 years, you don't get a renewal on the lease.
Mm-hmm.
You guys take all that stuff out? It doesn't sit there?
Yep. As part of our lease agreements with all of the landowners, there's a decommissioning process where we will take the modules off. We have, with our module manufacturer, we have a recycling program in place for them to take the modules back because it's mostly glass. And so they'll take the modules back, and then all the steel that's in the ground, we'll recycle all of that. So we end up recycling more than 90% of it. So there's a significant value to that too. So we decommission everything. The only thing that doesn't come out is any cable that's more than, I think, 3.5 feet buried in the ground.
Okay. And then the owner can do what he wants with the property after that?
Goes back to whatever it was.
Now, that would also, let's just say after 18 years, you guys say it's not profitable to do that, you also take it out then, or do you wait till the lease is over?
So if we decided to, most of our, I can't be specific on this one, but most of our leases have if the solar facility is inactive for greater than I can't remember if it's 1 or 3 years, it says that we are responsible for decommissioning it. So it's not, it depends on, depends on the lease.
Okay,
but
no,
most of them are like that,
I don't
yeah.
want it to, let's say you had a 30-year lease and after 12 or 15 years, you guys say it's just not and then the people around it have to sit there and watch this thing degrade for 15 years before you're forced to remove it.
Yeah.
And that's just my point on that.
Yeah.
So, the only other question I have is, again, in my research, and I spent hours and hours on this over several days, is they say that it creates hot zones above the area. That, and I'll quote from GreenBiz, which is a big, that but they said one of their negatives is while the black surfaces of solar panels absorb most of the sunlight that it reaches it, only a fraction, approximately 15%, actually get converted to electricity. The rest is returned to the environment as heat. The panels are usually much darker than the ground they cover, so a vast expanse of solar cells will absorb a lot of the additional energy and emit it as heat, affecting the climate. What do you guys see as far as that goes?
So we did submit 2 papers previously to the city that kind of refuted that point. But I guess to kind of boil it down, what it's talking about is basically creating a heat sink, right? So everything is just going to sit there and like be hot, 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 hot.
Right.
So if you were to walk up to a panel in the middle of the day, it would be warm to touch. Like it's not like you could sit there and fry an egg on it, but it would be warm to touch. But the thing that makes it say you can't basically create this heat sink is when the sun goes down, they go back to ambient temperature.
Right.
So it's never hot enough, long enough to basically create a hot zone.
So even on like a breezeless day and it's just building and all of a sudden the breeze comes through, the poor neighbors aren't going to hit with like, I think I read a record of 185 degrees blowing through their neighborhood?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have one.
Yes, I have several.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The inverters you talked about, is there any negative to the neighbors, surrounding neighbors, or anything like that?
So the biggest thing we've heard on inverters is noise, and so we've learned from previous projects that we've worked on. We now have a minimum setback of 300 feet. So we went and we had a whole bunch of, we typically use T-Mic inverters, so we had T-Mic come out to a couple of our sites, do some studies to show, hey, if I am standing right next to this inverter, what's the sound, and like how does it dissipate as you move away from it? So if you are more than 300 feet away, it will basically sound like you're in a library. It's not, it's a little bit of ambient noise, but it's not significant. I have a video on my phone if you want to listen to one like standing right next to it. But it's probably, I would equate it to, if you're standing right next to it, almost a big air conditioner on the back of a building. And the way that we place the inverters. So the biggest thing is like the cooling mechanism where all the controls are, and there's a fan, and that's what makes the noise. And so the way we place our inverters, we always try to make sure that fan portion is heading in and not out. And on this specific site plan, I think the closest inverter is over 450 feet away from the property line. And then also is you have a vegetative buffer that is going to block
block
noise as
sound.
well.
May I say something real quick? Because we talk about a lot of technical terms and use acronyms occasionally. For everybody who hasn't seen the inverter, I think the best analogy, and Vanessa, correct me if, or a line, you've seen those ice makers that they have sometimes at the gas station, can they sit in a parking lot, and on one end of them, they'll have the cooling pack, whether it's an air conditioner or a freezer type unit. When you have the overall entirety of the site, the inverters are placed so that the cooling pack or the fans point inward across the field as opposed to out toward the neighbors. And as Vanessa stated, they were doing no less than 300. We have nothing less than 450 feet from the edge of property, and all inverter fan coolers are pointed interior to the property as opposed to at the peripheral edge. And in sound studies, it's surprising to see that the noise from wind, birds, insects, and other ambient noise, like traffic around there, is far less than if you had to be standing next to an inverter. Think if you had this as a residential property, you would have hundreds of homes with outdoor compressors and the noise there. So as an aggregate whole, the sound level at the edge of the property is less than the ambient noise of the countryside, really.
How many of these inverters are going to be on site?
20.
20 on 714.77 acres.
How many acres was that again?
714.77.
So the actual, to clarify too, there's about 91 acres, and this is all details on the site plan. I
Yeah.
know we're kind of
Correct.
getting a
Kind
little
of in the
ahead of
next item,
ourselves.
but yeah.
But there's a total of 91 acres in that 50-foot setback that goes all the way in the property. Then there's 55 acres that is designated for tree preservation. Then there's like a 5-acre there's a little bit of a carve out, like you'll notice a carve out at the top on the Alta surveys for the Arndts are keeping their homestead there. So they are annexed into, their homestead is annexed into the city, but we're not leasing that part of it. So there's the part there that's gonna go undeveloped. Same with the Joneses property. There's a 5-acre carve out for a future homestead if they wanted to do something and subdivide that, but we're not like putting anything on it. And then there's a carve out for Mr. Arndt's dairy because he wanted to try and keep some cattle and and do a few things there. So the total kind of like fenced in area is I think it's under 490 acres. And I think we have a cover letter somewhere that had that we resubmitted. But it's about 490 acres
We'll have an exact
impacted.
map of that
Okay.
in the next time to show you exactly the area, the buffers, the carve out, the tree canopy preservation, and where the inverters are.
Okay. I've got a couple questions. You've already answered, I think, some of Dr. Helm's questions. No batteries on site,
No.
because I was going to ask what type of containment area you have, so that was answered. There is no reason for any fire suppression automatic system on site then?
No.
No.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, so the biggest thing we are concerned about for fire is mowing, and so we have, like, if say, for some reason, a wire fell and got really hot in the sun and, like, had a spark, so we try to make sure that, and we submitted a fire plan too, that there's breaks in the site with interior roads to make sure that if for some reason something did catch fire on a short mowed grass, that it would be contained to the
So you
to an
actually
area.
put fire breaks around it?
Yes, yeah.
Wow. Okay, my next question is, you're going to have a camera system monitoring the place 24/7?
Yes.
And somebody monitors that?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other type of telemetry systems that's reporting data back to y'all?
Yes.
With some controls?
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
lot. There's a lot.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there is a SCADA system, which basically will take points from like the inverters, the combiner boxes, the motors, We have typically two MET stations, which will measure like wind and rainfall and
Okay.
temperature and things like that. And that is all reported back on a constant basis.
And is that via telephone lines or radio?
It's fiber lines.
Fiber?
Yeah. Like fiber.
So there's
optics,
gonna be
like
fiber
internet.
run all the way from this facility from point A to point B?
There's already fiber that runs along
I
our
think she
transmission
means
lines.
fiber internet.
Yeah.
Oh, the data will come back via internet?
Yes, internet,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So it's not a radio telemetry system?
No, no, no,
Okay,
no, no.
okay.
It's proprietary fiber too, isn't it?
I think so.
And,
SVG, something.
so it's gonna be about 490 acres of panels?
Yes,
Okay. That's all the questions I have for y'all.
over
Yes.
200,000.
And one other thing, because you said a MET station, there is a meteorologic station out there that'll monitor weather so that if an adverse weather condition happens, the panels can be turned to a resting state so that they can be flat and not be like a wind hazard. I can state that I've had personal experience on another application where the Tallahassee facility that is abutting the Tallahassee International Airport took a direct hit, and there was no damage there because they knew what to do and they were able to flatten the panels down. The panels, again, correct me if I'm wrong, the panels are all networked together. So when you have an inverter there, think of this as a network node, right? And your panels are tied in. So each panel is a distinct digital component of the array that's out there. So when the maintenance person comes by, or if a panel signals that, row 7, panel 256 is not producing, they know exactly where to go. This is not like putting Christmas lights in a chain and one goes out and they're all out. These are so expensive and so high-tech that each panel is reporting on efficiency so that they can look at that. You used another
So
SCADA system.
I will SCADA system. So I'll
Yeah.
clarify a little bit. So typically what we use now to check and see how panels are doing are drones, because it's a lot faster than checking all the data. So you basically will do a flyover and it'll measure the heat on the how the elements in the panels are working. And it'll come back like red or green and tell you whether or not a panel is functioning properly. And so we typically try to do that once a year in case we're not getting something off or we're missing something in the data that we're getting back.
And the SCADA software is very similar to most municipalities who use that at their potable water and their sanitary sewer or treatment plants. That SCADA system is really high proprietary civil engineering type software where you're
Controls,
monitoring
yeah.
valves and operations of systems. It's kind of fascinating, and you're seeing the nerd side of me now, but
Whose system is it? Whose system are you using?
Emerson.
Emerson?
Typically who we use.
The reason I ask, I mean, my background was in water and wastewater and electrical engineering and fiber optics and PLC programming, so I understand
Yeah.
everything you're explaining.
I'm a chemi electrical is just kind of foreign to me when it comes to that.
Just one more question from me. If you're using fiber optic, what happens if a hurricane's coming and that thing gets cut off? Has it got a backup system that puts everything down, or do you guys have a secondary way of doing it?
That's a good question. Yeah, I have to ask. I know that there's certain things like if we do see storms coming, because these are we're constantly looking at weather because we need to dispatch the power, right? So say there's like a cloud it's even so much as like clouds coming in, because that kind of upsets your grid, right? So if you have this little blip that you're constantly trying to manage. So weather is a huge thing that we look at. So if there's anything that we look at, I know that there's folks that just store everything, but I don't know if there's a second generation. I'm guessing not, because we don't have anything that would require secondary containment like a diesel generator. So like there's on the inverters, there's these step-up transformers on the inverters, but it has vegetable oil in it. So like there's not anything that has like gas or diesel or combustibles.
I have one question. Do you have solar in your house?
I live, so you'll know why. I live in Rochester, New York, so
Oh,
we get
okay.
like 140 inches of snow
I got you.
and no sun.
of sun a year. Okay, I guess at this time we can take some questions from the public or any statements.
I live in Gainesville and I have solar, and I'm hoping that they have backup because our CHW offices are in Progress Park. We have fiber coming in and we have a copper failover on there. It's just, you got to. It's Florida.
All right, Hal, you'd like to come up?
Dr. Harold Helms again for the record. I hate to have to say so, but you were deliberately evasive and misleading in your answer about noise. The question was never about acoustic noise. It was about radio noise. This gentleman is an electrical engineer. He knows what an inverter is. It's a switch, basically. What happens when you flip a switch? You get a pulse of radio noise. And it doesn't matter if it's a mechanical switch, which these are not, or an electronic switch, which they are. You still get a pulse of radio noise. You called it negligible. That is untrue. Their plant in Fort White generates appreciable radio noise at a distance of several miles from the plant. People around the plant are going to notice degraded cell phone performance. For those of you who don't live there, we have lousy cell phone coverage anyway. So we're going to really feel that. For me, with my emergency communications responsibility, they may knock me off the air. Now, there are things they can do. They cost money. And I don't know if Duke Energy is willing to do it. But they can surround their inverters with something called a Faraday cage, which is grounded, which very effectively contains radio noise. They can put radio energy filters on the power lines coming out, but again, that costs money. But I really think we need to think seriously about that. They are going to generate RF noise. To their credit, I think it's wonderful that they're doing the setback. That makes my wife and I feel a whole lot better about our retirement home. We're still going to have our privacy, and we thank you for that. The acoustic noise, I agree with you. The distances involved render the acoustic noise negligible. It's just that that wasn't the question you were asked. That was just the answer you chose to give rather than answer the question you were asked. So I would urge them to come forward with some sort of plan so that High Springs does not make as much radio noise as does Fort White. Because there are a lot of my neighbors, for example, who are not retired professionals, and they rely on broadcast television, not satellite television. They will often rely on cell phone only because, frankly, they can't afford to have both a cell phone and a landline phone. And being farmers, they need a cell phone. So, they're going to be in trouble unless they quiet down their inverters. They can do it. I'm not saying you should tell them not to build it. I'm just saying tell them to build it with proper noise suppression so that we don't have the problem in High Springs that we do have in Fort White. And you do have a problem. There are several radio amateurs in the area who are plagued by your noise. They have reported you to the American Radio Relay League, which will probably report you to the FCC. Once that report goes in, you will get an order from the FCC that says you have 30 days to remove the problem or shut down. They may even come and say, shut down and you can't get back on until you show us you fixed it. You don't want to go down that route. We don't want to see you go down that route. We'd rather you be a good neighbor. Okay, but you can't just go, we're going to do this because this works cheapest for Duke Energy. Okay. Another thing, as a comment, you were pointing. Yes.
Just so you know, the proper etiquette of this procedure is to talk to our chair.
Okay, sorry.
So it's no problem.
Sorry. They also said that there were tree lines within the property that they wanted to modify or take down. Now, I'm not an agricultural expert. I've just lived next door to farmers for 9 years, and I think a little bit has rubbed off. I've also taken some courses with NOAA as part of my emergency communications, so I kind of know how hurricanes and tree lines work. Those tree lines are wind breaks. They are critical to minimizing hurricane damage. And I think Duke needs to go back and talk to the hurricane experts at NOAA. I could even give them a nice contact over at Jacksonville that they could talk to about preserving those tree lines. And I take it that no trees are going to be cut along the perimeter. Okay. I have one other question for you, and I'm only asking it now because they are here and I want them to hear me ask it. The Rogers sold them some sort of a right-of-way for what is advertised as a buried cable. It runs parallel to my property line. Somebody has been out tying ribbons and tacking aluminum tags to trees all over the Rogers property, all along my property line, and over into Mr. Thomas's property on the other side of me. What on earth they're doing that for, I don't know. But I assume if they're going to trouble to do all that marking, they plan to do something. You don't just do that for giggles. And I want to know what plans they have outside of what they have told us about tonight. Because the area I just told you about is outside of anything on that map.
All right, thank you very much. I may be mistaken on one thing. When you asked your question initially, I thought it was based on the battery emissions, and I think that they tried to answer it based on the battery. I understand you're talking about the inversion switches. I don't think she was misleading on that. That's just my personal opinion. I think that she answered it through the batteries by saying there is none, but then, like you said, there is also the switches as well. I may be wrong on that, but do you guys have any answers for any of his other questions? Absolutely. All right, thank you.
And I want to state clearly that, excuse me, we really appreciate Dr. Helm's comments. I trust, having known Vanessa for a couple of years now, that she's never tried to be misleading. And Mr. Walker would certainly know that Jerry is not under oath going to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and fail to give an accurate answer. I don't know all the answers, and Vanessa also does not know all the answers. The little orange boxes that I make in my notes here are things that I couldn't answer, which specifically is the RFI information about the radio. But we do know who can answer that. So I spoke with Vanessa while we were back there, and if, excuse me, if possible, we would like to talk to Dr. Helms afterwards to make that connection with actual engineers that are electrical engineers that can talk about that, because I completely understand about Faraday cages and RFI and the problems that it can solve, but we can't answer that, and it's really, quite frankly, it's not directly germane to the zoning map amendment, but it does have to do with the site thing, and if he would so entertain, we would love to do a site visit with him or to his house or wherever he feels comfortable so that we could talk about that in more specific technical detail, because there is nobody here that can talk about that. Secondly, we greatly appreciate when citizens come up and say things such as, you need to look at the tree lines out there, and if I have a contact with NOAA or somebody who can help with that, again, we would like to make that connection so that we can do the best job possible. We're not here to do things right now, we're here to do things right. And so, while we can't answer all the questions, please understand, and I think you did interpret that correctly, we are not trying to shield an item, we just don't have an answer because neither of us are radio frequency experts, nor are we prepared to answer every single question, but we won't forget the questions and we will make sure that they are answered. As a matter of fact, in the actual site plan that you will see, there are conditions in there where certain things have to come back to the city. So we close that iterative loop. I think Mr. Walker can say that we're pretty good about making sure that we take copious notes and answer everyone's questions. So we would like to continue to work with them.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the public?
Oh, and tree survey, sorry.
Oh.
Yes, that's, I need a drink of water more than my memory will allow. Yes, the tree survey that is being conducted both on property and off property is my company, actually. The tags that are being placed on the trees are our licensed surveyors are conducting 100% tree survey on the property. The reason we're conducting a tree survey is we're looking specifically for trees that meet the requirements for preservation, whether they be specific species, specific size, champion, or heritage type trees. We tag every tree that's out there, and that goes into our overall tree survey, which is 100% of the property, meaning that we survey every single tree. We do that because tree mitigation and paying for trees that are removed is a component of any development application. Our surveyors are also surveying what is called the generation tie line, or the gen tie line that goes back to Gilchrist County. So they are surveying not only on-site, but the proposed route to make sure that every single tree within the perimeter of the project and its interconnection back to the substation in Gilchrist County is categorized, looked at for quantitative size as well as qualitative health. That's why we're tagging every tree.
Do you work with the forestry division or somebody that helps you with that, or?
Actually, no, we don't. In our office, we have engineering, survey, planning, landscape architecture, traffic engineering, construction engineering, inspection. Inside of our landscape architecture group, all of those landscape architects are very familiar with the species that is prevalent here throughout north central Florida, and they are all licensed landscape architects, licensed to practice in the state of Florida. We also have a certified arborist in our landscape architecture group, and she is the director of our landscape architecture actual department. And so oftentimes she will be the person as an arborist as well as a landscape architect do the evaluation on the trees. So we do that 6-7 days a week.
Thank you very much. Anybody else from the public right now? All right, come on. State your name again when into the microphone when you get there.
Frank Rogers. I just wanted to thank Dr. Helms for bringing up the point about the cell phones. That's really an issue with us. Some days, even now, we barely have service. So I guess my question is, I don't know what enforcement, it's going to be your board or what kind of enforcement is going to be over Duke Power to what they do on this. I guess my question is, if they don't put these,
Faraday?
I'm sorry.
Faraday cages?
Yes, the Faraday cages around that, and we lose our cell phone service completely, what avenue do we have to make sure they correct that?
Well, from what I understand, and unfortunately, most of what they get to do is supported by the state and federal laws. We are quite limited in what we can do. We can get agreements with them, but as far as our actual power to do anything after the fact is basically just maintaining the buffer and maybe noise ordinances. But other than that, I mean, green energy's been given such a broad do what you want thing that it's limited to what we can do. So that's why we try to get the agreements up front. And they would have to abide by that agreement. And, well, I mean, we've recently had a situation where we had to get someone to abide by agreement. They did earlier. It took us a year, but we got it done finally.
Is anyone on this panel a lawyer? Attorney? No. I'm assuming you're going to have an attorney go over all of this. Okay. All right. I'm just wondering, are you going to have that attorney look into this and see if there's any state laws regarding that?
We'll certainly look at that, yes, sir.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
I will say, for one thing, is since I've been on the planning board, I've seen this, our planning department, and as well as the rest of our city, be more in tune to the public. Before then, I mean, I've been here 16 years now, and I've just seen things railroaded through. I mean, the amount of time we spent here tonight on a planning board is amazing compared to what it used to be in the past. It was like, it's done, it's done, it's done. And then they worried about the consequences later. And even after we're done with it, it's got to go to the commission. So, and then why you guys are here tonight. In the past, we didn't care what the county did. You know, people didn't care. You're in the county, why should we worry about you? We do care. You're our neighbors. And also, you may become a resident someday, so we don't want you to be looking at us badly. So I will say, for the fact of what the city has done, at least the years I've been here, and since I've been on the planning board, is a very conscientious effort to make sure that everybody is happy in most cases. I mean, of course, you can't ever be happy with it all, but we do try. Any more statements from the public? No. Any more discussion up here on the board? Any questions? At this point, we have to go for a motion. I need a motion and a second to approve or to disapprove or table.
I make a motion that we approve resolution number PB-LPA-Z 22-02.
I second the motion.
All right, Christie, we'll need a roll call vote.
Don Waldron,
Yes.
Brad Riddle,
Yes.
John Walsh,
Yes.
Tim Bolliger is absent, and Hector Thomas.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right, would you like to take also the next one?
The next item on the agenda is for site plan approval. It is SIP 22-00009 solar facility site plan. And Mr. Chair, if you'll look in your agenda, the site plan is dealt with in a number of maps that are in our plan. And at this time, of course, Mr. Diembach has already been sworn, so if he wants to present on behalf of the applicant, we've already talked about ex parte communications, so we don't need to go over any of that. But again, this is a quasi-judicial matter as well.
Yes, you can go ahead and present your presentation. I guess we've actually stepped on this particular procedure, so you can just kind of slide through it if we've been there already.
Yes, thank you, Mr. It's always difficult because it's hard to talk about things in the periphery without getting like into the details. And thank you, Jenny. Okay. Our third and final item this evening is the site plan approval. And again, my name is Jerry Diedenbach. I'm an AICP certified planner, and I've had direct contact with the assembly and the processing of this application through the city of High Springs, as well as with Ms. Goff here from Duke Energy. Okay, so this application before you is to propose to place a solar renewable electric energy collection center on approximately 500 acres of a 700-acre tract of land in western High Springs. The opportunities that are presented, we feel, are the opportunity to create clean, renewable solar energy within the city of High Springs that'll be fed directly into the infrastructure grid and directly through a potential transmission line or interconnect to a substation that is located right at the county line in Gilchrist County. This will also permit quiet, passive placeholder on the site. And what I mean specifically by that is if you think of the long-term use of land and like the rotation of crops or use for heavy and agricultural type purposes, it depletes land of a lot of the minerals and the quality of the soils over time. We look at this as a real placeholder that for the next conceivable up to 45 years, nothing will happen on this property other than there will be steel, supports and solar panels there. The soil's natural capacity will refresh over time through rainwater and through microbes through the soil, returning it back to natural type conditions, and this becomes a placeholder. So if in 45 years we have some different type of power, whether it's fusion or some other type method of getting electricity, you can pull this up, or Duke Energy will decommission this at the term when this is no longer the way we collect our energy, and the site can return to agriculture. It could go back to growing trees. It could go back to being a flower factory or a large nursery, or it could go back to being an animal type facility for raising agricultural produce on the site. Also, a tremendous opportunity is an opportunity to reduce nitrogen levels entering into the Floridan aquifer. As stated during our land use and zoning, we are a very small applier of any sorts of herbicides, pesticides, or fertilizers on here because we're not trying to push something out of land. We're trying to passively collect light energy on panels and turn that into electricity. And so in lieu of thinking of all the things and byproducts that happen on a dairy or in active agriculture, that is all gone. And rainwater will hit these panels, and with very limited applications, perhaps along fence lines or areas where it's impossible to mow, there will be minor uses of chemicals on the site. There will be no storage, as Vanessa said, of combustibles or other type of fuels on the site. So this is a great opportunity to have a real safe product or a safe site this close to the Floridan aquifer and obviously our springs and rivers here in High Springs. As I stated, the long-term placeholder promotes the soil actually restoring itself naturally over time as microbes and other insects and creatures habitate through this property. This will also preserve significant tree canopy. As I stated before, the perimeter area of this property will remain intact, and there will be additional vegetation added along the perimeter edge consistent with the Unified Land Development Code and city codes to create additional buffering and screening. So not only the trees that are there today, but new vegetation will be placed along those edges, and I'll talk about that more specifically. And that entire area that you see in the upper left-hand corner between the project site label and Northwest 174th Avenue, that's approximately 55 acres of trees that we are leaving in place in that corner for tree canopy preservation. There's no reason to take them out, so we are preserving that entire area up there. Next, this promotes and it has a great opportunity to provide employment opportunities both during construction and operation. There will be people directly from High Springs that will be involved in the construction and operation and long-term maintenance. So this creates jobs in the community, as well as boosting the economy by creating more actual commerce in the community. And then lastly, a project of this scale, looking at it compared to an agricultural use, this tremendously increases the city's ad valorem tax base with no increased demand on roads, schools, police, fire, utilities, or other municipal services. No children are going to live here. No families are going to be driving back and forth here. There's no need for police, fire, emergency vehicles here comparative to a neighborhood or other rural type use. And so there's really a tremendous boost in the city's economy. And it kind of pains me sometimes when I'm here and I hear that, there's debate about, well, we can't afford to get Narcan injections for police officers because they cost so much. A property like this is a tremendous, tremendous financial benefit to a community. So I want to thank you sincerely for the previous two actions that are grayed out at the top, the recommendation to place agricultural, city land use, and city zoning on this property, and we would like your recommendation for approval of this site plan. The project site sits at the western edge of the city's municipal limit, and you can see on this map the potential transmission line which goes across the county line to a Duke substation that exists on that diagonal line going from the center west third of the map all the way up to the top corner, and that's their transmission connection line. And so that's where we've been surveying and tagging trees along that light or almost fluorescent green line that zigs to the west of the property. This is an overall aerial of the property, and you can see here there are areas, and I wish my laser pointer would work on your map, but northwest of High Springs Estates, I'm sure most of you all know where that is. That's about midway in the map, and it abuts the southern portion of the dairy. There are carve-out areas that I'm going to show you on the actual site plan map here, but this process began well into 2021 with 2 community workshops and several meetings with City of High Springs staff. We mailed out to approximately 439 individuals, and this is a copy of one of the actual postcards that was mailed out. And we held 2 open houses over at the High Springs Community Center where representatives from Duke Energy, myself, and engineers from Duke Energy were there to answer citizens' questions and hopefully incorporate any of their concerns or thoughts into the overall site plan application and the way that the site is designed. We submitted then an application on May 5th of this year, and with those binders and boxes of materials that we brought up here, we submitted all our materials electronically, and then the city issued engineering comments through your professional engineering staff of Mittauer and Associates that Ms. Stefano sent to us so that we could have our respective staff and engineers and sub-consultants look at. We resubmitted the application materials on June 7th, and we responded to every one of the comments that was in the Midtower and Associates professional review letter. And we are here tonight seeking your seeking your approval on this request. So here is the site. It has, and hopefully will have, a city agricultural land use on it and a city zoning classification on here. As stated during the previous two items, the Florida legislature and the governor on July 1st of last year signed into law that a solar facility shall be permitted in all agricultural land use categories in a local government comprehensive plan and all agricultural zoning districts within an unincorporated area. And it must comply with the setbacks and landscape buffer area criteria for other similar uses in the agricultural district. So this is a by right project. Solar can exist on agricultural land use and zoning. In addition to the application materials that are before you tonight, because you are looking specifically at the site plan, Duke Energy, and specifically Ms. Goff, have applied for several regional, state, and local permits. A water management district permit has been applied for the stormwater basin associated with the maintenance and operations facility. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection has what's called an Environmental Resource Permit, or an ERP, that has been applied for. Fish and Wildlife Commission has been applied for a gopher tortoise relocation permit. The Department of Health permit for the 4-inch well and septic tank at the Maintenance and Operations Building has been applied for. The applicant has also applied for a city driveway permit, and we've applied for a county right-of-way permit for underground crossings where necessary for the transmission line to connect in. And lastly, as the component, the tie-in on the Gilchrist County side at the substation, that was applied for through the Gilchrist County Commission, and that was approved unanimously about 10 days ago or so. So there are multiple other permits that have been applied for or are in the process of being obtained through regional, state, and other local agencies. One of the conditions that's in the Midtower report is that all permits will be delivered to the city upon receipt so that the city can then hold all those permits. And I believe there was a question earlier, who helps enforce things? The city will be the recipient then of all those different permits. So through code enforcement and other means, you will all know, what kind of wells permitted out there, what do we have to do for gopher tortoises, what is like the right-of-way and driveway access permit. That will all be fed to the city as part of the process. So the May 26th Midtower and Associates letter that came through, thank you to the city manager who promptly got that to us on a Thursday, and I believe within a week we were all done with our response to comments, and we responded to every comment in there. And I wanted to quote their closing where their professional engineer signed and sealed this. Pending our minor comments being adequately addressed, we approve this initial submittal and find it generally satisfying the city's LDRs or LDCs and development design standards for a preliminary site plan review. Please address these comments provided herein and include any additional requirements stated on the final site plan submittal. So after that, we submitted on June 7th in response to all of Midtower's comments and addressed every comment and agree with every condition to supply all permits that will be received outside of the High Springs realm to the city as part of this application package. This is a picture of the preliminary and final site plan submittal. And again, I wish my laser would work, so I will have to talk to you a little bit more graphically. If I start at the 12 o'clock position, like on a watch, there is a carve out that you can see at the very top along Northwest 174th, and that's where Vanessa had stated that there's a carve out that the family is going to retain their home there. Okay, as we move down the eastern side of the property, you see a notch into the property approximately at the area where it says vegetative buffer area. That is the carve out for the dairy there that she described that Mr. Arndt will like to look at doing some livestock, and that is not a part of the project area. Then you go further down, and then the project site jogs westerly at about 270 degrees, and then directly south, and you can see that the rest of that property line remains pretty much untouched. There are no carve outs along the south or the west or coming up the west side. In the upper left-hand corner, you see the area that says Tree Canopy Preservation Area. That area is about 55 acres of canopy that I've talked about numerous times during the land use and zoning that will remain as untouched canopy, and that's why we went out there and surveyed that to look at it qualitatively and quantitatively. Down through the center of the drawing is the main access, and you can see the blue hatch pattern. I trust it's blue on your monitor. Those are the access roads that will go to the area where the actual inverters are along that spine, and the inverters sit in the field, and at no point is any inverter closer than 450 feet from the property edge. As we look around the property's edge, you can see that there is a consistent buffer that goes around the entirety of the property, and there's a left diagonal hatch in areas, by example, south of the Arndt's Dairy, up against High Springs Estates, where it states there is a 100-foot vegetative buffer typical there. Inside the 150 feet, like I stated previously, the applicant is proposing to put 100 feet of vegetation in there. And to give you an idea of how that plays in, Alachua County's code, and they adopted, because you're effectively reviewing this under code standards of the county right now, since it doesn't have a map amendment finished yet, it requires up to 75 feet against non-residential or 150 feet against residential area. We kept that 150 feet consistent around the entirety of the property. Moreover, the table then refers to, and on the bottom row, hopefully that's not too small, the high-density buffer requirements in table 407.43.2 state that they have a minimum width of 40 feet of high-density vegetation. The applicant is proposing 100 feet, so they are proposing 2.5 times the vegetative screening within the 150-foot buffer around the entirety of the site. In areas where it is not residential in nature, okay, where it's other civiculture or agriculture, that drops down though. But in the areas where there are abutting residences, the buffer is 2.5 times the size of what the requirement of the code is. So, somewhat in conclusion, the applicant's final site plan submittal documents will address all the engineer's comments. That has been done and turned in, and all pending permits will be supplied to the City of High Springs that are paralleling this application, such as Water Management District, Fish and Wildlife, FDP, and so forth. So on that, we are respectfully requesting that based on the competent substantial evidence presented in the application materials, the city's professional engineering consultants review and report, the Regional Planning Council's concurrency report, the city's resolution, and tonight's presentation and dialogue, that we are requesting that the High Springs Plan Board approve the requested solar facility site plan with associated conditions in SIP 22-000009, 5 zeros and then a 9. And we're happy to answer any specifics. And again, I wish my laser would point, but if you have anything, I'm tall enough to get up to the screen and show you any specific answers that may need to be brought forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You said that it's going to, you're going to have a 150-foot buffer all the way around, no matter what.
That is correct.
Okay, and then that's the same also with residential. If there's a home nearby, it's going to be 150. And you said something different about if there's no home there. What was the difference on that?
Inside the areas where, Mr. Chair, there are abutting residential,
Right.
the code would require 40 feet of high-density vegetation. We are proposing 100 feet of high-density vegetation.
Right, and if there is no budding or no residential area, what would still be the same, or is it going to be less?
It will go down to 50 feet where it is abutting other agricultural type uses, because there's no real sense in placing 2.5 times the buffer when you're talking like an ag to an ag use. It's
All right, what about, let's say someone buys a budding property and puts a house there, they just have, because they came last, that would be, or would there be anything for adding some vegetation to that?
It's a really good question. Anticipating a future.
That's going to be there 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah. Could you please go back to the PowerPoint? We have tried to anticipate that actually, and in one of the maps that we used, if you want to go directly to, because a lot of the abutting lands are large in nature, meaning they're 40, 50, 60 acres and up, if you look along the western side of the boundary where there are smaller parcels, and I'm coming down directly south
Right.
of the tree canopy preservation area, you see that the buffer got fatter in that area?
Yes, I see that.
We did that because those were smaller parcels and we were thinking that there were either existing residences there or that had the ability. Now, around the south side of this, you know, Mr. Post still has some active silviculture. So in areas where he is going to continue that, we did not increase it there. I have personally spoken to the owner of the land south and east of us, south of High Springs Estate, who has no intention of doing any development on that, so we did not increase the buffer there. I know that could be something that may be in the future. The opportunity, I think, exists because the land is going to be set aside as 150 feet wide. That would be something that Duke would have to consider whether in time, if that were a condition, if somebody converts a piece of agricultural land to a single-family residential unit, that they would come in and accentuate that.
You know, I mean, you're leaving the buffer still there. There's
Right.
spot for it, so that might be an item that's out there that if residents, and like, I'm not gonna be alive that long, but in 30 years, I mean, someone puts a house, I mean, things get subdivided up and all of a sudden somebody sells a piece of property off and they,
Yeah.
hey, well, we'll come in here and we'll just throw a little bit more vegetation in there. I mean, I was just a thought process there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a good forward-thinking thought.
Okay, what's the expected power output of this plant? I mean,
Yeah.
how much?
74.9 megawatts.
Is the transmission line that's going down the property and the other way, is that going to be like the high-tension power lines that are running now, or is it something smaller, or?
No, so the way that it's designed is, so you have your inverters which take it from like a 12.4 MVA to the inverters take it to 34.5, which is considered medium voltage. And so a medium voltage cable is maybe this
Yeah,
big.
I got you.
And there's 3 circuits, and that will run along that green line and under, and then we'll have our generation step-up transformer, which will take it to the transmission level on the Gilchrist. That's what we just got approved through Gilchrist County with the conditional use permit. So the generation substation, so all the really big equipment
Is going to be in the Gilchrist, so it's basically just running a smaller cable throughout,
It's
so.
like, it's a distribution line
Right,
underground.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, oh, it's underground?
Yes,
is.
it's
Oh,
underground.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I actually thought it was going to be aerial when I flew the site with the drone early on because the main transmission lines are cutting right across the top of the
Well-
armed area, and then Vanessa explained that it's.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because the original transmission lines that are there.
Just a quick clarification from her. The green line on
Yeah,
your
just a second, let us finish and we'll let you ask on that. Or would you-
It's there right now, so you just quickly answer it, we could save time. Is that
All right,
okay?
go ahead, real quick.
The green line on your PowerPoint there runs adjacent to my property, then it runs down a shared access road for a short distance in the north-south direction, and then cuts over to County Line Road. That one, is that going to be an aerial line or a buried line? All of it?
On the green is buried. So the point where it comes up out of the ground is on the north side of that green box.
Everything else is underground.
Okay.
And
We're cool with that, we like that.
it's on the, and where it goes from north to south, it's on the east side of the road.
Obviously, you're not gonna dig the road up, 'cause that's our only way in and out.
Yeah, no, it's on the east side.
Okay, and basically, even though you're removing all the trees in the middle, other than your large untouched area, you're adding back the windbreak by putting a much larger buffer even on areas that aren't there currently. So I know a lot of the windbreaks are basically there to keep the soil from blowing away, as well as wind and storm and stuff like that. But the panels, they're made of glass, correct?
Correct.
Is there some sort of material on it that keeps them being fully reflective, or are they fully reflective?
They're designed to absorb.
So, I mean,
Absorb
if
light,
they're
so
aimed at a
there's-
certain, and the sun's, they turn, so they're not even actually reflecting off the sun. It goes right back toward the sun then, right? So you don't have to worry about a neighbor like him catching it just right, and, because I've
Yeah.
seen some fixed solar panels, and you can't even be on one side of the place because the sun bounces off just right. And
Yeah.
But
it
these
doesn't-
move and face the sun the whole
yes,
time?
They move east to west. Where
Okay.
if fixed tilt, it'll just sit south, and
So you don't get that fixed situation where the sun will hit and then, okay,
Correct.
that's all the questions I have. Anybody else?
15 inverters is what I counted going on that property?
there's 20, so there's a couple spots where there might be 2 instead of 1.
Yep, there's 20 of them. Yeah, I missed it.
Okay.
And you can see, I trust that they are in along that main spine road and interior to the project site as opposed to at the periphery.
What is the voltage leaving?
The voltage leaving this.
It's going to tie into the power line.
So it goes 34.5, and then at the substation, it goes to 69 kV.
Okay.
Just a question, comment. I read in the proposal that the capacity is going to be able to fuel 23,000 average size homes, is that correct?
Yep.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, an average home is about 1,000 kilowatt hours. So,
Just one other simple question here. The soil tracking prevention device, what is that?
soil tracking, sorry.
It's actually on the plan. There's I had to use a magnifying glass to really look at the thing, but there was a.
Is it a misspell? It might be solar instead of soil. It might be
Okay,
It
okay.
might be a typo.
Solar tracking, okay,
Solar tracking.
okay.
It might be a
That's
ty-
forward to turn and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Time of year, time of day, and
And,
selection efficiency.
yeah. And on the windbreak, you were saying a lot of times it's used to keep the sand down. So before we start construction, we'll seed and we'll plant Bermuda grass. So that'll help keep like dust and make sure that, the site is covered. And this one, we won't really do anything because it's a dairy, it's already fully grassed and.
So you're gonna basically not, just use most of what you got existing and then just try to put them all in there without disturbing the soil.
Yeah.
Now, contingency plans, if the grass all dies, we have a drought, which seems like we get every once in a while, what do you guys just come in and water it manually, or do you just hope it comes back, or
We'll
reseed it?
We'll reseed it.
Okay,
I failed to mention too that if you look at the very top next to the carve-out site, there's actually a pollinator site on that.
There's about 20 acres that we're gonna plant pollinators.
Yeah.
Got it.
And the very, very top, next to the carve-out where the Arndt family home is, there's a pollinator site in there for bees and other pollinating species to promote vegetative growth and.
Yeah.
any more questions from the board? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Any questions from the public?
I'm just still looking for that invite to Dr. Helms' Radio Wonderland.
Okay, Mr. Helms, I'd like to get your number, or you get my number afterwards too. Okay. I guess there's no more discussion here. I guess we need a motion and a second to either accept, delay, or reject.
I'll make a motion that we accept SIP 2209 Solar Facility Site Plan.
I second.
All right, we have a first and a second. Any more discussion? Public? All right, we need a roll call vote.
Donald Alderman,
Yes.
Brad Riddle,
Yes.
John Walsh,
Yes.
Tim Oliver is absent, and Hector Thomas.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Taking a 2-minute break.
Let's take about a 5-minute break real quick, and so people can go. It's been here a while, so let's recess for 5 minutes. Okay, we're bringing this planning board meeting back to order here. And we got business item number 5. If the attorney would read that resolution for us.
This is a resolution of the Plan Board of the City of High Springs, Florida, recommending to the City Commission of the City of High Springs, Florida, approval of a conditional use as provided for in Section 10.02.03 of the Land Development Code of the City of High Springs, Florida, pursuant to an application CUP 22-01 by the property owner within and providing a conditional use permit for a mini storage facility within an existing RV boat storage facility within a commercial C2 zoning district, as provided for in Table 2.02.01 of the Land Development Code, providing for a revocation of the conditional use, repealing all resolutions in conflict, and providing an effective date. Appropriate motion at the appropriate time is to pass resolution PB CUP 22-01. You can deny it, or you have the ability to move it to a date certain in the future. And this is quasi-judicial also, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do we have the applicants here? All right, would you approach and give your name?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. I'm Clay Sweger with EDA Consultants. Would you like me to?
Yeah, you can make a presentation. Or, yes, go ahead.
Do you swear, Clay, do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Clay.
All right, go ahead.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for hearing this item tonight. And I won't take it personally that everyone left the room for my item. That's okay. Just a brief set of comments for you. This is the storage space, RV and boat storage facility. Oh, great. Thank you for the assist, city staff. This is located just up the street on 27 at 2620 US Highway 27. And it's an existing RV and boat storage facility in C2 commercial zoning. There's commercial zoning to the west and to the, actually industrial zoning to the south. There's a number of commercial and industrial uses right along that corridor. This site was approved with a conditional use permit by the City of High Springs back in 2016, and the site was subsequently developed. You can see the existing buildings in the southwest corner of the property, along with some uncovered boat and RV storage to the east, and a small office building in the corner. There's actually a very large and substantial buffer along the east property line as well. And to the very north end, there's an existing stormwater retention pond. And then there's a cleared area in the middle, which was always planned for future, whether it be RV or boat storage. But now, in this case, there's a new property owner, and they would like to do some self-storage, which in the city LDR is allowed as a conditional use permit in C2. And so that's what we're requesting tonight, is that use to be approved. The site plan is in your backup material, but that also has to be reviewed under a separate application for all the technical requirements. But essentially, it's the existing cleared area on the site that would be filled in with 5 self-storage buildings. All the infrastructure is in place, essentially. The stormwater retention area is there. The access to 27 is there. That would remain unchanged. The landscape buffers would remain in place as well. That was one of the conditions of the 2016 conditional use permit and would be proposed to remain. No access, no full access to 259th Terrace would be proposed. There is a gated entrance over there on the side, but that's just for emergency purposes and so forth. So really, it's kind of a completion of an existing commercial site. The use, as I mentioned, is required to be approved via a conditional use permit. The criteria for approval, which the city granted back in 2016, have remained the same. Essentially, you need to show that you're compatible with the surrounding area. This is a very quiet, clean commercial use with very low traffic. So it should not create any issues with compatibility or impacts to public facilities. traffic generation would be very low, particularly given all the wide range of commercial uses that could occur on the property. There is suitable and adequate access, drainage, and buffers, as I mentioned. Those are all in place currently. And there wouldn't be any adverse impacts to health, safety, and welfare for this use. Again, very quiet, clean, low-traffic use will be a nice addition to, hopefully, to the city of High Springs and the local economy. I did mention that this is compatible with the land use pattern as well, with the commercial and industrial zoning districts in the surrounding area. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have tonight, and I appreciate your consideration on this.
Are these just storage areas, or are there going to be any kind of warehouse where people can actually work out of them? And
Mr. Chair, they would just be self-storage. It's not workshops and
Okay.
shops and so forth.
how many of these units?
The total square footage is approximately 77,000 square feet. That's the 5 buildings that's shown on the site plan. I don't think that I don't know exactly how many individual units they would be, but they'd be your typical storage units that you rent and can access.
So they're
the
different
exterior.
sized and stuff like that?
Yes, sir. Yep.
At least a couple hundred?
Yeah, I would say
I
so.
would say,
Yep.
Would these match the storage units that are across the street in the original?
Mr. Chair, I think they'll be very similar to what's across the street. Yeah, the same sort of prototype that you see on the south side of 27. Yes, sir.
Any electric to the units?
There'll be electric, but other than that, there's no utility connections proposed.
Right, I was actually on the board when this got approved originally, and the neighborhood was upset with that the first time, and there was a lot of limitations placed on that, including no people could do any construction work on a site. In fact, the dry storage or outdoor storage that they had there was prohibited, and they got away with that for several years before we got rid of that. And then I understand, and does anybody have a list of what the commission, I know there were some restrictions placed on by the commission too. Does anybody have a list for that from the city or anyone that we have?
I have that, I have it, I can pull it up, you can just look at it.
Okay,
Just to let you know, this would just more or less, it would be the exact same ordinance unless y'all put additional conditions on it. So none of the existing conditions would go away, the way the ordinance, when it goes to the commission, will be written.
okay. Also, what's the state say about this? As far as your driveway increase?
Well, we don't propose any changes to the access, given the extremely low amount of traffic generated. Based on the transportation engineer manual, it's approximately no more than about 116 daily trips spread out. So we would verify with them that they would not want any access management changes. They do have the right to consider that. I don't believe that they would ask for anything given that extremely low amount of traffic. That access was designed in a way which anticipated future commercial use on the property. But we will have to verify that and provide that to the city as part of the final permitting. I did want to also just mention to you, I did have the ordinance from 2017.
Right.
And I was there too.
Okay.
So one of the big issues there was the landscape buffers.
Right.
And so that was codified in there.
And the downlighting instead of outlighting?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I remember all
And
that, okay.
So the buffer, it would remain, that we wouldn't ask to change anything. That's still reflected on the site plan. They also, several neighbors indicated they didn't want access onto 259th, so we conditioned that it would just be off of 27 directly. And that, you have a great memory, by the way, that there's
It was pretty contentious if you were here
Yeah.
for that meeting. It got heated.
Yep.
Now,
There's no vehicle maintenance to occur on
right.
the property, which was,
Right. Now, how about the units? Are you guys going to put up post lights now, or is it strictly going to be low lighting, or are you going to be putting tower lights up or stuff like that?
well,
Because that was one of their things. They didn't want these big light poles up there shining around. That's why they had to do just down lighting only. If that's changing, you're going to get some kickback on that.
Well, we would propose to meet city code, A, and B, probably just have some security lighting on the buildings and not have any high post lights.
Okay. And the reason why I brought up the driveway is the property just east of it has a driveway in there. It's been in there for 20-some-odd years. And they've been denied access to their property based on the fact that you've got access to your property. And the reason why you have access to your property on there is because of the load that was going to be coming in there. The state, I've actually talked to the state guy on this, and he said, well, they were granted the access off of 27 only because there was these boat storage units there. You're talking about increasing that eightfold. I mean, I'm pretty sure the state's going to have a problem. They won't let them put in a deceleration lane, so I don't think you'll have that ability either. So I don't know how that's going to play out in this fact.
Property to the west of us?
To the
vacant
to the
property?
east.
Oh, vacant property to the east.
Right. And I've talked to the state guy who came out and looked. In fact, they want them to remove that whole driveway and culvert that the state themselves put in. So my point is if they're, I'll tell you, that's going to be a church, very low use.
Right.
And they're saying they can't use that. And the one property got it, so I'm wondering, I mean, I think the state would have to be informed of this and see if they would use the same formula or I mean, that's just my opinion on that. I mean, we can go ahead with this, but then it could also get kicked back.
Well, I think, I would say it doesn't need to be a condition in the ordinance of approval. We have to get DOT approval for access.
Right.
And the fact that that driveway's there, they will look at it and make sure that it doesn't need enhancements or improvements beyond what's there.
I just think, go ahead.
I just want to add in also that, this is just a concept plan, so they have a site plan in currently for review, based on if you approve the conditional use. So as we go through the site planning process, we'll look deeper into that.
I just think we should have an answer from the state before we move this forward anymore. I mean, and not only that, I don't see any of the neighborhood people here. I mean, was this posted?
So I did post a sign, there is one out there right now, and I did meet the requirements for how many days in advance and all that good stuff, so we are good on notifications.
I can verify the sign is in place as well.
Any more
this
questions?
afternoon.
Any more questions from the public on this? I'm like I said, I'd still like to find out what's going on with that first. I mean, do I have a call for a vote on this?
But the motion can be to table it to a date certain. You can deny it, or you can approve it.
If you table it, it makes it better for us because we don't have to re-notify and,
Okay.
and the additional costs.
Okay, well, I can't make a motion, but I lean strongly toward postponing this and tabling it for a while. So you guys, I need a motion either for that or to approve it, or, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I apologize to get in the middle, but if there's any way to possibly advance this with a condition that DOT permitting has to be confirmed, as the city manager indicated, we do have to submit a full site plan engineering package to the city before anything can be done on the site. I would really appreciate that. We've been working on this for quite some time, and just on behalf of the property owner, they would really like to be able to keep it moving forward, and I do feel very strongly that DOT will not have any objection to this based on the extremely minimal amount of traffic, and the fact that it's a properly designed and permitted driveway.
I think our biggest concern is, one, there's nobody from the neighborhood here.
It was posted though, so.
It was posted.
But again, you're talking about an adjacent property that was denied access to their own property based on their load, and now you're changing the load there. I mean, technically, the DOT could come out and say, no, you can't have that drive. I mean, I know it was specifically designed for the type, so you could be off-road and get off, because I guess the biggest problem with this road is the speed limit affects the amount of access on and off the road. And don't forget also, if you start accessing that, well, let's say 10 or 15 times, well, let's say 20 times a week, people are accessing that, that's far more stoppages on that road at that speed than what you have there now. I mean, I don't know how many units you have there, what, it's less than 40 storage, so, you know, I mean, and if they're lucky, they visit their boat or their RV once a month. I mean, now you're talking about 8 times, 9 times more possibility, and then if you got a lot of smaller units, it could be even more, depending, I'm just based on 200 units. I mean, I think that should be verified first. I mean, even a fax or a letter from the state, I think would, because you got so many conditions going on here with other properties. I mean, the property next to you over here, if they want to put one in, they can't put a driveway in, and now, I don't know, this is my personal opinion on the thing. I understand the work that's been done, I understand it's done right. I also understand that there was a lot of conditions placed on this originally by the board and the commission, and I understand, if I'm correct, I wasn't at the commission meeting, but there were actually more limitations placed on the property, and I'm just wondering, is this, now that it's later, is this going against one of those? Because I'm pretty sure the neighbors would say something about it too.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
if I may, I believe that the neighbors aren't here because of the conditions that were placed and that have been adhered to over the years. And there was a history with the previous property owner at that time, 5+ years ago, where there was some clearing of the site.
Yep.
That really upset some neighbors, that had nothing to do with that application, but it happened. And so there was some ill will there. And I think the city really did a good job in providing the conditions to address the main concerns of the neighbors at that time. And the site has been built. It looks good, I think. The buffers are pretty substantial. And I think that's why you don't have the neighbors out. A 50-foot buffer is pretty substantial. They wanted to keep the trees along 259th, and they did that. They didn't want an access to 259th. They agreed to that. They didn't want vehicle maintenance, and they agreed to that. They needed to do a landscape plan, which they did. And so I really believe that's why you don't have, 7 or 8 neighbors like you did back in 2016, is because things have been done the right way and they followed the conditions. As far as the access goes, we would like to, and we feel like we're going to be able to keep that access on 27. The alternative is that access goes on to 259th, which is what neighbors didn't want.
Well, and I understand that, and that would also have a large bearing on your site plan if they all of a sudden want to redirect that. And I've actually, just a few months ago, took complaints from the people that live down the neighborhood that it's hard for them to get out of that neighborhood. Now, if you end up creating a more slowdown there, I mean, it's going to be even harder for them to get out. And that's, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think we should table it. And the only reason why is because I'm going to vote no on it. And if it gets voted no, that's going to be, worse. So that's just my opinion. I want more information on that access for off of 27 right now. So, but I mean, they can do what they want, but I'll just let you know that's where I'm at now. Instead of voting it down, and I don't know if it'll pass or not. I mean, that's just my opinion.
One thing, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I appreciate the dialogue very much. It has C2 zoning, and so there's a lot of uses allowed by right in C2 that don't require a conditional use permit.
Right.
Don't even need to go through this process. Some that would have 10, 20, 30 times more traffic. This is extreme. This is about the lowest possible trip generation you can have for commercial use on the property. So I just wanted to make that point as well. There could be a shopping center that comes in or something that never comes to the plan board. I certainly do not want a denial. I would like to avoid that at all costs. So if the board sees fit to table this item, I understand. I would just need some direction on what you need from me. I do think that the DOT issue could be placed as a condition if the board saw fit, and there's plenty of opportunities for the city to get those confirmations with. I think this goes to the city commission as well, this particular item.
Yeah, yes, it does.
Not to mention the site plan approval, if you all would entertain that idea, but I certainly spoken my piece. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
you know, well, this is just kind of a side.
I'm sorry, I can't actually hear you. Can you switch your mic on?
Yeah, maybe you could clear up this, Ashley. My question is, the property already has a conditional use based on the buildings that they have there now. Is it still necessary to have another conditional use because it's expanded?
Yes, it is, because the way the ordinance is written, and they have to come back if they wanna do more buildings.
I see, okay.
And,
That's the exhibit, the initial exhibit only had 2 buildings.
and that's what my point is when the state guy was down talking, and we talked to the state guy himself, and that driveway was questioned, why were they allowed to, and we have to have these people remove theirs? And they go, well, he's only got 2 buildings with 40 people.
Now he's gonna have
Hundreds.
200.
You know, and that's the only thing I'm thinking of, and if that ends up being a big thing, then it gets quashed that way. I mean, we could put a condition on it, but then, you know, now we've muddied it all up in the first place. I think it should be just clean before it comes. That's just my opinion. So, any more discussion? Okay, I'll need a motion on something, whether you want to table it or deny it or approve it.
So let me make, if we table it, this would be the best route to go at the present time
For the city.
for the city. But you are, and I understand your point, you really want this cleared up. It's gonna have to be cleared up with DOT down the road. If we had that information right now, we could move forward, correct?
I think we could, yes.
Does anybody have an answer how long it would take to get this information from DOT?
From what I understand, it took 7 days to get information from them, but it took another 3 or 4 weeks for them to finalize it on that other property there. And they actually sent representatives out and they were talking about putting out the cables, but they didn't do it based on something else. And they were also, this neighborhood also called them out, the state, because they want the speed limit lowered. And the state did some sort of test and said, no, it's not ready to be lowered yet.
But that might trigger the lowering.
No, he said that would have no bearing. It's all strictly on road load.
Not somebody turning into that particular
No,
property.
no speed change or anything. It's just strictly how many people are on that road.
Yeah, I'm under the same assumption that, I think it's the best thing for the city just to table, isn't it?
I mean, we could have this back on the agenda, then for what I'm.
Well, they don't have to repost. That's the good thing.
Okay. So this could come back before us next month.
How soon could it come back?
Well, so we do have our normal meeting this month, so that will fall on June 28th, so that's, what, 2 weeks from now? So you can choose that one, otherwise the next meeting would be July 26th would be the next meeting.
I mean, if we can get a jump on
June
this,
28th or July.
if we can get a jump on this and have that information in 2 weeks, I think we can go for it.
Wait, does that give you enough time, you feel like?
You think you can find out something, at least get a letter from them?
Can we have a special meeting for this one item, if need be?
Yeah, but it's just 2 weeks away, so it's not that far, so.
Okay.
What was that first date? I'm sorry, was it June?
The
Yeah.
20,
So the next one's June 28th.
3 this month.
Mr. Chair, DOT doesn't really like giving out responses to things that aren't ripe, you know, that they don't have an official permit for. And I can't get answers from them in a short period of time. It probably will take longer than that. I don't think I'll have something for you by the 28th, most likely. I'll probably need to come back in July. And probably need the city's help in
can we,
that as well.
what's the legality of not putting it on the, I guess you have to, I'll say you have to put, can we put it on the agenda, and if you're not ready,
Yeah, you can continue to.
I'm more than willing to roll you through. I just think I need an answer on this. I mean, It's just, because of, like I said, the way that they talked about this and how that condition was on there for that driveway. I mean, the guy was saying the only way you could get more people in there was to put a deceleration lane in there, and the state's not gonna give anybody that. So, I mean, not to mention the cost of, I think he was saying somewhere around, $250,000 to $300,000 to be able to put one in. So, I mean, I don't want to end up with a situation saying, yeah, we'll approve it, and then we go through all the steps, and then the DOT says, well, we got to stop dead in the tracks, we got to bring this all back and do it all over again. I think we can get an answer for that, and I'm more than willing to go with it from there.
So if you table to the 28th, and we would do our best to get the response.
And if you
not,
don't,
then
we'll
you
put it
can-
right to the next one. Yeah, we're more than willing to fast track this
That
as much as
sounds great.
possible.
I think
Okay.
that's the best possible option. Thank you.
And if you get something from them, or just a fax even, I mean, I'll even meet them out there if you want to, so, I mean, no problem.
Okay.
Okay?
Great. All right, we'll
All right.
work on that.
So I need a motion or something on to table it, or one of the other choices?
What's the number on this one?
Oh, I've got mine all mixed up.
I did too, that's why I'm asking you.
Here it is. Number 5, right?
So, we're going to table
Yeah, make a motion
Motion to table
to the 28th.
to the 28th
June
of
28th meeting.
PB/CUP 22-1.
I second it.
Can we get a vote on that, Christie?
Donald Alderman,
Yes.
Brad Riddle,
Yes.
John Walsh,
Yes.
Tim Bollinger is absent, and Hector Chavez.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, I guess that concludes all the stuff for today. I need a motion to close the meeting.
Motion to close the meeting?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign? All right, meeting is over at 9:36 PM.